Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Luke Jobson. Luke Jobson, a 22-year-old who was on the verge of qualifying as an electrical and mechanical engineer after completing 4 years of study and an apprenticeship. He was a well-liked and talented individual who was known for his athletic abilities, particularly in football. Growing up, Luke attended St. Patrick's Comprehensive and Hawood Primary Schools in Thornaby. He was a talented sportsman, playing football as a center forward for Thornaby Central in his youth. His love of clothes and fashion was evident, and he took great pride in his appearance. According to his dad, Stuart, Luke was a perfectionist who would often check his family members' clothes to ensure they looked their best. Stuart described Luke as a genuine and beautiful person, both inside and out. Luke, a young man from Yarm, attended a nightclub called The Keys on Saturday, January 26, 2019, along with his friends. Yarm is a small town, and The Keys is a popular spot on the high street where the town's nightlife is concentrated. Luke failed to return home after his night out at The Keys, and his parents tried to contact him on Sunday morning, but he didn't respond. His friends were also unaware of his whereabouts. Luke's family quickly took to Facebook to appeal for help, and many people joined the search for him. The police investigation began on Sunday, and Cleveland police released a statement expressing concern for Luke's disappearance, as it was out of character for him. They asked the public to share any private CCTV or dashcam footage that might be relevant to the case. Police had learned about a possible altercation involving Luke shortly before his disappearance. According to reports on social media, Luke got into a fight with several people outside The Keys around 2 a.m. The last reported sighting of Luke was near Yarm School at around 2:15 a.m. The police were investigating this information, but their top priority was finding the missing young man. Luke's girlfriend, Danny, made a heartfelt plea on social media, describing her experience as a living nightmare and urging anyone with information to come forward. Luke's cousin, Jake, also reached out on Facebook, asking for help in locating Luke. He was last seen fleeing from a group of young men on Yarm High Street. Friends and family initiated a search for Luke near the River Tees in Yarm on Sunday, which eventually grew into a large-scale operation. By Monday morning, hundreds of concerned individuals gathered at Yarm School's car park, eager to contribute to the search. Despite many not knowing Luke personally, the overwhelming response to the Facebook appeal showcased the community's spirit. Cars arrived at the car park, carrying people who were ready to aid in the search. Many others arrived on foot, dressed in warm clothing, prepared to brave the cold weather. Over 300 people participated in the search, which was divided into 18 groups that scoured various areas, including Preston Park, Stokesley, Cottonwood, Early Nook, and Hilton. Specialist police search teams also combed the River Tees banks near Yarm School. A body found in a River Tees has been identified as 22-year-old Luke Jobson, who had been missing. Cleveland police confirmed the news and expressed their condolences to Luke's family and friends. Family members are being supported by specially trained officers during this difficult time. In a tribute, Luke's parents, Lisa Jobson and Stuart Banks, described their son as a popular and ambitious young man who loved working out at the gym. Luke's mother, Lisa, said they are proud of everything he achieved and want to celebrate his life. She added that they want everyone to remember him for the good things he did. The news of Luke's death sparked an outpouring of emotion in the Teesside community. Friends and family members flooded social media with tributes, and a huge crowd gathered in Yarm for a vigil in his memory. Almost 1,000 people attended the event, which included a firework display and a rendition of Angels by Robbie Williams. The community showed their support for Luke's family by leaving ribbons, balloons, and flowers near the scene of his death. As the police investigated Luke's death, they spoke to numerous individuals, including those who were at the nightclub on the night of the incident. They also obtained CCTV footage, which corroborated earlier reports of a confrontation between Luke and several others. The footage shows Luke wearing a gray t-shirt, jeans, and white sneakers. It appears that Luke made a comment to someone, which caused several aggressive-looking individuals to approach him. The situation quickly escalated, and Luke can be seen running away from the group as they chase after him. News of a confrontation being linked to Luke's death emerged soon after he disappeared, as speculation about what had happened spread on social media. Initially, the police only confirmed reports of an altercation prior to his disappearance. They arrested 6 teenagers, aged from 16 to 18, on suspicion of involvement in Luke's death, but later released all of them. The investigation continued, and a new development in the case occurred the following January. Cleveland police announced that 5 people, aged 17 to 20, had been charged with a fray, which involves using or threatening unlawful violence, but not with Luke's death. They were set to appear in court. The 5 individuals charged include a 17-year-old, now 18, who cannot be named due to age restrictions, Edwin Taha, 20, Ryan Alp, 19, Ali Abdul Majid, 19, and Hamad Asif, 18. According to reports, Edwin Taha was the alleged leader of the group. In England and Wales, a person can be charged with a fray if they use or threaten violence towards another person in a way that would cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety. To understand the events leading up to Luke Jobson's death, we need to consider the following points. Firstly, when 2 or more people use or threaten violence, their actions are considered collectively. Secondly, for a threat to be valid in this context, it cannot be purely verbal. Looking at the recording, it's clear that Luke was concerned for his safety as he was seen running away. The threats against him were not just verbal. Unfortunately, the exact cause of the conflict remains unclear, as none of the suspects provided a clear answer. Additionally, the whereabouts of Luke's friends, who were with him at the nightclub, are unknown at the time of the quarrel. The police recording does not provide this information. From the footage, it appears that Luke was not planning to leave the club, as he was standing outside in just a t-shirt, with his jacket still inside. The footage shows Luke confronting a group before being forced to run for his safety. Initially, his athletic ability allowed him to overcome his suitors. However, the group, including Taha and other future defendants, returned to the nightclub, got into a car, and caught up with Luke near a school. They sprayed Luke's face with an unknown substance, suspected to be pepper spray, causing him to lose his sight. In an attempt to escape, Luke climbed over a wall into the school grounds, where CCTV cameras captured his entry into a boathouse. Sadly, this was the last time Luke was seen alive. After Taha pepper sprayed Luke's face, the group got back into their car and drove away. It's unclear whether Luke knew where he was going, but given that he didn't attend school there and was disoriented from the tear gas, it's unlikely he understood his surroundings. If this was the case, it's possible he accidentally fell into the water once he entered the boathouse. It's worth noting that these events took place in January, when the water in the river was extremely cold. According to the police, no one else entered the boathouse that night, and Luke never came out. 2 days later, the police found his body in the water near the school, and the cause of death was determined to be drowning. The suspects initially refused to admit guilt, but during the first court hearing on September 28, 2020, Edwin Taha and Ali Abdul changed their minds and admitted to their involvement in the fight. Autopsy results from pathologists Dr. Nigel Cooper and Dr. Jennifer Bolton revealed that Luke had consumed alcohol before his death. The amount he drank was likely to cause noticeable signs of intoxication in an average person. The police had released Edwin Taha on bail, and none of the suspects were detained before the trial. The investigation found that the victim had traces of a banned substance in his system, which, combined with alcohol, made him more vulnerable to hypothermia. There were no injuries or evidence of assault, and the deceased did not have any underlying medical conditions that contributed to his death. While the autopsy did not show any signs of eye inflammation or evidence of being sprayed with a substance, witness statements confirmed that the deceased, Luke, was pepper sprayed and struggled to walk and see. The perpetrator, Taha, later bragged about the incident on the high street. The coroner concluded that Luke was incapacitated by the pepper spray. The verdict was announced in October 2020. In an emotional statement, Luke's mother, Lisa Jobson, addressed the court as the individuals responsible for her son's death faced justice. Miss Jobson described the gang that had surrounded her son, Luke, before chasing him through Yarm High Street as a pack of wolves. She explained that from the day Luke was born, he had been loved, cared for, and protected. He had been their world and their only son. They had been extremely close to him, and he had been a kind, gentle, and genuine person who had touched the hearts of everyone he had met. Luke had been a loving and caring individual who had lit up a room with his presence. He had had good friends from diverse backgrounds and cultures, and he hadn't had a mean bone in his body. He had been a positive person who always strived to be his best and had always been looking forward to new experiences. Miss Jobson expressed that they would never forget the terror Luke had faced that night, and the fact that none of the gang members had had the courage to take responsibility for their actions was unbearable. Knowing that their faces had been the last ones Luke had seen on this earth was a constant reminder of the pain and suffering he had endured. It was a living hell for them, and they were left to live with the knowledge that their son hadn't been able to escape safely. At the trial, the lawyer for Abdul's co-defendant stated that Abdul was unaware that Taha possessed pepper spray. He claimed that Abdul did not expect the victim to be assaulted with a weapon. Only one person, not Abdul, knew that Taha had a pepper spray. Taha's lawyer revealed that his client had a difficult childhood, which had led to poor decision-making. On the night of the incident, something was said that triggered a chain of events. Taha acknowledges that the outcome should never have happened. Taha's lawyer also shared that his client had moved to the UK from France at age 4 and had been left to live with a foster family after his mother returned to France. The judge emphasized that neither defendant was directly responsible for the victim's death, but noted that the chase had led to the victim entering the school and boathouse, ultimately resulting in drowning. Taha, 20, was sentenced to 21 months in prison after pleading guilty to a fracas. He also received an additional 4 years and 4 months for charges related to prohibited substances. 19-year-old Abdul, of Corvus Drive in Stockton, has been sentenced to 15 months in prison, suspended for 18 months, after admitting his involvement in an incident that led to the death of Luke. Abdul was also ordered to complete 300 hours of unpaid work. According to the court, Abdul was driving the car that pursued Luke on the night of the incident. The court heard that the altercation started on Yarm High Street, where Luke was chased by a group of males in a vehicle. When they caught up with him, he was sprayed in the eyes with a noxious substance, which had a severe effect on him. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Robinson stated that the altercation had a devastating impact on Luke's family, who have been left without their son and brother. She added that the incident has caused immense pain and hardship for the family, and that nothing can bring Luke back. However, now that the case has concluded, the family may find some closure and be able to move forward with their lives. Charges against 2 other individuals, 19-year-old Ryan Alp and 18-year-old Hamada Sif, were dropped. To summarize the case, Chris Atkinson of the Crown Prosecution Service made a statement after the sentencing in October 2020. He stated that although Taha and Abdul were found guilty, the focus remains on Luke Jobson's family, who may find this time particularly challenging. The prosecution successfully proved that both men were involved in an altercation with Luke before his death. However, it is essential to note that there is no evidence to suggest that their actions directly caused the tragic events that followed the attack. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rebecca Bliefnick. Rebecca and Tim who met at Quincy University, were the epitome of a perfect couple. Rebecca was a biology major and a tennis player, while Tim was a star football player. 2 years after graduating, the practical couple decided to tie the knot. Instead of splurging on an engagement ring and a lavish honeymoon, they chose to save their money. Although Rebecca had a genuine interest in medicine and had dreamed of becoming a doctor, she decided to pursue motherhood instead. Her dream came true when she and Tim had 3 sons. Tim was known for his charisma and ability to entertain. In 2008, he auditioned for American Gladiators, making it to the final round. Years later, in 2019, he received an invitation from the producers of Family Feud to participate in the show with his family. Rebecca's nursing school commitments prevented her from joining Tim on the TV show Family Feud. Undeterred, Tim assembled a team of family members, including his parents and brothers. The show's format features 2 teams competing to guess the most popular responses to survey questions from 100 people. Despite being unprepared, Tim's team performed well, earning points and ranking second on the scoreboard. They went on to participate in 3 episodes, winning a total of $20,000, which was divided equally among the family members. However, Tim did not share any of the winnings with his wife Rebecca. This decision highlights the strain on Tim and Rebecca's marriage, which began when Rebecca pursued a nursing career against Tim's wishes. Tim had expressed concerns about Rebecca's well-being and ability to manage stress, but Rebecca's friends believed Tim was opposed to her independence and autonomy. Rebecca's friends noticed that she was becoming increasingly unhappy in her marriage over time. At first, her marriage to Tim was relatively happy for about 5 years, but then Tim started to become more controlling and manipulative. Despite Rebecca's hard work in her nursing studies and job, Tim didn't pull his weight at home, leaving Rebecca to handle most of the responsibilities. Rebecca realized that their marriage was struggling and wanted to fix it, so she suggested that they go to marriage counseling together. She believed that counseling could help them find solutions and improve their relationship. However, Tim refused to go, despite Rebecca's efforts to save their marriage. In January 2021, after 11 years of marriage, Tim suddenly filed for divorce, which caught Rebecca off guard. She had been committed to working through their issues, but Tim had already made up his mind. He moved out of their family home and into a new house across town, leaving Rebecca to pick up the pieces. Tim and Rebecca's divorce was extremely contentious. They were unable to agree on anything, and their communication broke down completely. The couple disputed several issues, including who would get custody of the children, how they would divide their property, and how much alimony one would pay the other. Things escalated to the point where Tim felt threatened and applied for a court order to protect himself from Rebecca, alleging that she was stalking and harassing him. Rebecca had a different view of the situation, accusing Tim of harassment. She shared her concerns with friends through text messages, describing incidents where Tim yelled at her, pushed her in front of their sons, and threw things. Rebecca feared Tim might do something drastic to take her children away, which alarmed her sister, who knew Rebecca's fears were valid and that she needed help to protect herself. Rebecca then filed for an order of protection against Tim, claiming he entered her home without permission and lied about their interactions. However, the judge denied both Rebecca and Tim's requests, instead ordering them to stay away from each other's homes, except during child custody exchanges. In February 2023, Tim told the police he wouldn't return a gun, calling Rebecca a derogatory name. At the time, Rebecca and Tim's 3 sons, aged 12, 10, and 5, were staying with Tim at his home, just a mile from Rebecca's residence. Their divorce was set to be finalized in just 1 week. Tim contacted Rebecca's father the next day, worried because he couldn't reach Rebecca, and she had failed to pick up the boys from school as planned. Given Rebecca's dedication as a mother, her father suspected something was seriously wrong. Concerned for Rebecca's safety, her father rushed to her house. When he arrived, He entered the house, calling out to Rebecca, but received no response. He went upstairs to her bedroom, where he found a disturbing scene. Rebecca lay on her back, covered in blood and gunshot wounds. After Rebecca's father discovered her body in the bathroom, detectives and forensic experts arrived at the house. They began by carefully examining the outside of the property, searching for clues. Their investigation revealed that the suspect had probably entered the house by forcing open an upstairs window in one of the children's bedrooms. The discovery led investigators to believe that the suspect used a patio chair to gain access to the house and climb up to the roof. By retracing the suspect's likely path, they went to Rebecca's bedroom, where they found the door had been violently kicked in or broken. The state of the door suggested to investigators that the suspect had forcibly entered the room, probably in search of Rebecca. Evidence indicated that Rebecca had tried to barricade herself in the bathroom, but the suspect had pursued her and caught up. Ultimately, the suspect shot Rebecca inside the bathroom. During their search of the bathroom where Rebecca's body was found, investigators stumbled upon her cell phone. Upon examining Rebecca's phone, investigators found a 911 call dialed at 1:11 a.m. This led them to form a theory about the events of that night. They believed that as the suspect chased Rebecca through the house, she tried to call for help, but accidentally dialed a wrong number before she could try calling 911 again. The misdialed call at 1:11 a.m. suggested to investigators that the suspect had knocked the phone out of Rebecca's hand. They believed Rebecca was likely killed around this time. However, when police questioned Rebecca's neighbors, none of them remembered hearing any noise around 1:11 a.m., which raised suspicions among the investigators. A thorough search of Rebecca's house revealed that her murder was not a botched burglary, as nothing was stolen. Despite this, the perpetrator left behind significant evidence. One notable discovery was a partial shoe print found near the point where the suspect entered the house. The shoe print discovered at the crime scene could be crucial in identifying the type of shoe worn by the suspect, including its make and model, as well as providing details about the size and shape of their feet. The presence of 8 9mm shell casings and small pieces of shredded plastic near Rebecca's body also provide significant leads for the investigators. Despite collecting these key pieces of evidence, the investigators were unsure how to interpret their findings. To gain more insight, they decided to send the evidence to forensic laboratories for further analysis. Specifically, they wanted to determine if any of Rebecca's personal belongings matched the evidence found at the crime scene. The investigation began when Rebecca's father found her lifeless body in the bathroom of her home. Upon arriving at the scene, investigators carefully examined the exterior of the house, leading them to identify how the perpetrator gained entry by prying open an upstairs window in one of the children's bedrooms. Here's what likely happened. The suspect used a patio chair to climb up to the roof and entered the house. The investigators retraced the suspect's steps and found that the bedroom door had been violently kicked in or broken, suggesting the suspect had forced their way in, probably looking for Rebecca. It seems Rebecca tried to barricade herself in the bathroom, but the suspect caught up with her. Unfortunately, the suspect shot and killed Rebecca in the bathroom. The investigators found Rebecca's phone near her body and examined it. They discovered that she had dialed 911, but mistakenly entered an extra digit, 91126, at 1:11 a.m. This discovery helped the investigators piece together the events. They believe Rebecca was desperately trying to call for help as the suspect chased her through the house, but she accidentally dialed the wrong number. Before she could try calling 911 again, the suspect likely knocked the phone out of her hand. The timing of the misdialed call at 1:11 a.m. led investigators to believe that Rebecca's murder likely occurred around that time. However, when they questioned Rebecca's neighbors, none of them reported hearing any suspicious noises, which was surprising given the fact that she had suffered multiple gunshot wounds. A thorough search of Rebecca's house revealed that her murder was not the result of a burglary gone wrong, as nothing was stolen. Despite this, the perpetrator left behind a significant amount of evidence. One crucial discovery was a partial shoe print near the point of entry, which could help identify the brand and model of the shoe, as well as the size and shape of the suspect's foot. The crime scene also yielded 8 9mm shell casings, and small pieces of shredded plastic were found scattered near Rebecca's body. After gathering all the evidence, the investigators were unsure what to make of their findings, so they decided to send the CED evidence to forensic laboratories for further analysis. The detectives wanted to determine if any of the evidence found at the crime scene matched Rebecca's belongings. A neighbor had installed a security camera on the side of their house after their car was broken into a year earlier. The camera was directed towards the neighbor's driveway, which shared a boundary with Rebecca's home, and was set to turn on and alert the neighbor whenever it detected movement. Although the camera didn't capture anything significant on the night of Rebecca's death, it did record something unusual the previous day at 1:05 a.m. The footage showed a person walking down the driveway towards the back of Rebecca's house, a potentially crucial discovery in the case. About 48 minutes after the initial sighting, the same individual was seen walking in the opposite direction. Interestingly, Rebecca's neighbor had captured a similar incident on their camera about a week prior, on February 14th. After reviewing their security footage, Rebecca's neighbors noticed a suspicious dark-clad figure lurking around her house on Valentine's Day, prompting them to alert her immediately. Upon learning about the mysterious figure, Rebecca became increasingly paranoid. Although she claimed not to have seen anyone on her property, she had heard unsettling voices in her backyard the previous night, which frightened her. Based on the security camera footage, the police expanded their search to neighboring houses to gather more evidence of the dark-clad individual. Their search led them to a house near the Quinney bus barn, where they found footage of a person riding a bike, dressed in dark clothing, heading towards Rebecca's house. These videos confirmed the description of the mysterious person seen in the original driveway footage, providing a clear consistency in the suspect's appearance. After analyzing the recorded times of the videos, detectives suspected that the person on the bike was the same individual seen in Rebecca's driveway footage. Although Rebecca's neighbor's security camera didn't capture footage of the mysterious person on the night of her murder, officers found footage of someone on a bike riding towards Rebecca's house just before and after the incident. This person matched the description of the individual seen lurking in Rebecca's driveway in the days leading up to her murder. While the video evidence was helpful in the investigation, its poor quality limited the information it provided. The detectives couldn't identify the person in the video due to the grainy image, making it difficult to determine their gender. However, they did notice one distinctive feature: the bike had no reflectors on its wheels. When Rebecca's sister heard that she was murdered, only one person came to mind as a suspect: Rebecca's estranged husband, Tim. Rebecca's sister, who had a first-hand account of the contentious divorce between Rebecca and Tim, shared this information with the detectives working on her sister's case. The detectives suspected Tim of murdering Rebecca, especially since her murder happened just a week before their divorce was due to be finalized. During the investigation, they made a crucial discovery: a bike with no reflectors on its wheels, similar to the one seen on security footage, was found just a block from Tim's house. This discovery increased the suspicion surrounding Tim, leading the detectives to obtain a search warrant for his home. When the police executed the warrant, Tim cooperated fully, standing outside his home with the officers as they searched his belongings. On March 13, 2023, 2 weeks after Rebecca's murder, Tim was arrested and charged with her murder. When his mugshot was released, Rebecca's family and friends were shocked by his appearance. which was very different from the clean-cut man they had known. Tim's friends and family were shocked by his disheveled appearance, which they attributed to the emotional toll of his recent divorce. His once neat and tidy hair was now unkempt, and his clothes were messy. They speculated that the divorce had affected not only his physical appearance, but also his mental well-being. However, Tim had a surprising explanation for his changed look. He revealed that he was growing his hair out to support a charity campaign for cancer research. Despite this, a viral video clip showed Tim's appearance on Family Feud, where he made a bizarre statement about regretting his marriage, which took on a disturbing tone after he was arrested for murdering his wife. Many people believed that Tim's comment on Family Feud was a strange and unsettling prediction of what would eventually happen. They thought it showed that he had hidden feelings about his wife and was a sign that something bad was happening in their relationship. When the police looked into Tim's phone, they found that he had made a fake Facebook account under the name John Smith. During their investigation, they discovered that Tim had been searching for a specific type of bicycle on Facebook, a blue Schwinn bike with no reflectors on the wheels. This was an important discovery because it matched the description of a bike that was found abandoned just 1 block away from Tim's house. Despite having strong evidence against Tim, the detectives faced a significant obstacle when they arrested him. Tim was held in jail without the possibility of bail, but he requested a quick trial, which is his right under the law. Prosecutors were required to bring the matter to trial within 90 days of Tim's arrest. The prosecution faced a significant challenge in convincing a jury, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Tim murdered Rebecca due to the absence of a confession or DNA evidence. Juries typically look for these 2 key elements in criminal cases. To prove Tim's guilt in the murder of his wife Rebecca, the prosecution faced a significant challenge. Exactly 3 months after Rebecca's tragic murder in her home, Tim's trial began on May 23, 2023. During the trial, the prosecution presented several key pieces of evidence found at the crime scene. One notable piece of evidence was the shredded plastic fragments discovered around Rebecca's body. The prosecution argued that these fragments came from an owl's grocery bag. Further investigation revealed that similar bags were found in Tim's house. The prosecution alleged that Tim used these bags as a makeshift silencer when he shot his estranged wife multiple times. They claimed that the bags were used to muffle the sound of the gunfire, preventing it from being heard by others. The prosecution also presented DNA evidence, suggesting that Tim left behind DNA while using the Aldi bags. An expert testified that it was highly likely Tim contributed to the DNA found, and that his DNA could not be ruled out as a match for the DNA found under Rebecca's fingernails. The prosecution presented evidence suggesting that a crowbar found in Tim's basement might have been used to force open the window at the victim's house on the night of the murder. Although an expert testified that there were microscopic similarities between the crowbar and the window's pry mark, she couldn't conclusively say that the crowbar was involved. To build a stronger case, the prosecution presented records of several searches made on Tim's phone, including how to open my door with a crowbar, how to make a homemade pistol silencer, how to clean gunpowder off your hands, and average police response time in Quinny. The prosecution's expert witness testified that she compared the shell casings found at the crime scene to those found at Tim's house during the investigation. Her analysis revealed that 27 of the casings from Tim's home were fired from the same 9mm weapon used to kill Rebecca. When investigators searched Tim's house, they didn't find Rebecca's 9mm gun, which he had refused to return to her. Tim claimed he hadn't seen the gun in months before Rebecca's murder. During the trial, the defense had the opportunity to call witnesses, but chose not to. After the 6-day trial, the jury took 4 hours to reach a guilty verdict, and Tim was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Despite claiming innocence and planning to appeal, Tim is behind bars, and Rebecca's family believes justice has been served. During the sentencing hearing, Rebecca's family read impact statements. One of her sisters addressed Tim, telling him how his actions affected his son's well-being. She stressed that his choices were causing his sons to suffer. Rebecca's sister vowed to keep her memory alive for her 3 sons, even after her passing. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Girish. On November 30th, 2003, Shuba, a 27-year-old law student, became engaged to Girish, a software engineer. Her father, a respected lawyer in Bengaluru, had a stellar reputation in the legal community. As his daughter grew older, he worried about her marital prospects. Consequently, he arranged her marriage to Girish, a suitable match with a good job at a prominent multinational company. The two families had known each other for years, which further solidified the union. Confident that Girish would provide a secure future for his daughter, Shuba's father gave his blessing for the engagement, set to take place on November 30th, 2003, with a wedding planned for April 2004. However, 3 days after the engagement, on December 3rd, 2003, Shuba suggested they celebrate with dinner at a restaurant that evening. Girish was thrilled, as this was the first time his fiancée had taken the initiative to plan a night out. Before dinner, Girish took Shuba to his office to introduce her to his colleagues. Afterwards, they headed to a restaurant on Old Airport Road for dinner. After the meal, around 9:30 p.m., Girish and Shuba began their journey home. But on the way, Shuba asked Girish to stop near the airport's landing strip so they could watch the planes take off and land. Girish agreed, parking his scooter to the side, and they stood together, enjoying the planes and each other's company. Suddenly, 3 boys on motorcycles appeared, attacking Girish. Shuba was left alone to face the 3 armed boys, and she desperately shouted for help. Unfortunately, they were alone at that moment, and the 3 boys brutally beat Girish before fleeing. Shuba persisted in shouting for help, and her cries were fortunately heard by a passing car driver who stopped to assist her and Girish. With great effort, both the car owner and Shuba managed to get Girish into their vehicle and drive him to a nearby hospital. The doctor admitted Girish and immediately began his treatment. Meanwhile, Shuba notified both her and Girish's families about the accident, and within a short time, both families arrived at the hospital. Despite the doctor's best efforts throughout the night, they were ultimately unable to save Girish, and on December 4th, they pronounced him deceased. Since this was a clear-cut case of murder, Girish's father rushed to the nearby police station that same day. He recounted to the police how his son and his fiancée had gone out for dinner the previous night, and how, while they were standing at a landing spot near the airport, Girish was attacked, ultimately leading to his death. The police promptly took over the case and began their investigation by questioning Shuba, the sole eyewitness to Girish's murder. Given her distress, she had been inconsolable since learning of Girish's death. The police approached her gently. However, Shuba's account matched the one Girish's father had already provided, prompting the police to launch a thorough probe of both the crime scene and Girish's background. They even explored the possibility that Girish had personal enemies, but their efforts yielded no concrete leads to crack the case. According to reports, the police were unable to find any CCTV footage in the area, which was largely deserted and lacked residential cameras at the time. Consequently, the investigators turned to Girish and Shuba's engagement video as a potential source of leads. Their motive was to investigate whether someone close to Girish might have been involved in his murder, given that only their families were aware of the couple's trip. The investigative officer meticulously examined the engagement video, focusing on the behavior of their families and relatives. However, no suspicious behavior was detected among them. Undeterred, the officer re-watched the video, this time concentrating on Girish and Shuba's neighbors and other guests in attendance. Unfortunately, this effort also yielded no positive results. In the midst of the investigation, the officer took note of Shuba's facial expressions. Unlike what one would expect, she didn't seem happy and was making an effort to keep her distance from Girish. Initially, the officer had focused on the behavior and expressions of Girish and Shuba's relatives, almost neglecting Shuba herself. But after seeing Shuba's unhappy expressions and attempts to distance herself from Girish in a brief clip, he decided to review the entire engagement video again. Upon re-examining the video, the officer observed that during the ring ceremony, Shuba looked visibly sad while sitting with Girish and was consistently trying to create space between them. This struck the investigating officer as unusual, as newly engaged couples are typically ecstatic. Shuba's evident unhappiness raised his suspicions, but he also recognized that relying solely on a video wasn't enough to take action against her. Therefore, he decided to investigate Shuba's call records. Although it was unusual for the police to use this technology in 2003, as it was still relatively new in India at the time, the officer's interest in technology led him to pursue this avenue. In fact, mobile phones were a rarity in India back then, but Shuba's wealthy family had made it possible for her to own one. Upon obtaining her call records, it was revealed that on December 3rd, Shuba had made repeated calls to a single number. The police then traced the number back to a boy named Aaron Verma. The police then delved deeper to uncover who Aaron Verma was and what his connection to Shuba was. They soon discovered that both Aaron and Shuba attended the same college, with Shuba being 2 years his senior. This new information prompted the officer to track their locations on December 3rd. Shuba's location was found near the airport, as she was with Girish. However, when tracing Aaron's location, the police found that he was also near the airport, following Shuba to every location she visited. This heightened the police's suspicion, and they subsequently tracked down Aaron Verma and summoned him to the police station for questioning. When the police questioned Aaron about his whereabouts on December 3rd, he claimed to have been out of town for work. The instant he made this statement, the investigative officer was convinced that Aaron was lying and would never admit the truth if asked directly. So they released him, but secretly tapped his phone beforehand. The officer suspected that Aaron and Shuba might be involved in Girish's death. However, they couldn't present them as guilty in court based solely on their alibis and call records from that day. Therefore, they put Aaron's phone under surveillance, believing that if he was involved in the murder, he would eventually incriminate himself. Upon returning home from the police station, Aaron's first call was to Shuba. Over the phone, Aaron informed Shuba that the police had questioned him about Girish's death. Shuba asked if he had disclosed anything to the police. Aaron reassured her that he had kept quiet and successfully misled the police, telling them he was out of town on December 3rd. When the police heard the recording, their suspicions were fully corroborated, leading to the immediate arrest of Aaron and Shuba. At the station, the police presented them with the call recording, call detail records, and location history. Initially, both attempted to deceive the police, but eventually, Aaron's nerve failed, and he confessed to the police that they had indeed murdered Girish. The unfolding story stunned everyone. The 19-year-old Aaron and 27-year-old Shuba had been secretly involved for the past 2 years. It was astonishing to learn that Aaron, still in his teenage years, was deeply in love with a woman 7 years his senior. Reports suggest that Shuba also desired to marry Aaron, but their dream remained unrealized. Shuba's father discovered their secret relationship and disapproved of Aaron, who was significantly younger than Shuba. As a result, he hastily arranged Shuba's engagement to Girish, which took place on November 30th. However, Shuba was unhappy with this arrangement. Despite Girish being educated and financially stable, Shuba found his simplicity and modest lifestyle unappealing and felt he wasn't a suitable match for her. During the investigation, it emerged that Shuba had confided in her beautician at the time of her engagement, revealing her intention to either flee before the wedding or harm Girish. Coerced into the engagement by her father, Shuba had now devised a plan with Aaron to eliminate Girish. This explained her repeated calls to Aaron, who agreed to carry out her plan. With the help of his cousin Dinesh, Aaron hired a local thug named Vinette. Shuba planned to lure Girish out of the house on December 3rd, pretending to take him out for dinner. On their way back, she would take him to a secluded spot near the airport's landing strip, where it would be easy to carry out the murder. According to this plan, on December 3rd, after dinner, Shuba expressed her desire to watch airplanes take off. He agreed to his fiancée's request, and they proceeded to the landing spot. Throughout their journey, Shuba kept Aaron informed about her location through regular calls and messages. Shortly after, Aaron, Dinesh, and Venkatesa arrived at the flight landing spot. Dinesh and Venkatesa then launched a brutal attack on Girish, striking him on the head with an iron rod. Girish collapsed instantly, bleeding profusely from his head injury and losing consciousness. Once the four were convinced that Girish was on the brink of death, Aaron and his companions fled the scene, abandoning the iron rod in the nearby bushes. After a significant period following Girish's injury, Shuba sought help, and the rest of the story unfolded. Despite this, Girish's killers managed to evade the police for nearly 50 days until Shuba and her accomplices were arrested on January 25, 2004, when the motive behind Girish's murder and the identities of his killers were finally revealed. The news of the incident spread rapidly throughout the state media. The police gathered all the evidence, interviewed witnesses, and prepared their case file, which was then presented in court. Although the case languished in the regular court for a lengthy period, it was eventually transferred to a fast-track court. Even in the fast-track court, the trial continued from 2007 to 2010. In May 2010, the fast-track court sentenced Shuba, Aaron, and their companions to life imprisonment. However, in July 2010, Shuba filed a bail application with the Karnataka High Court, which upheld the lower court's decision and rejected her bail plea. With no other option, Shuba then filed her bail application with the Supreme Court in August 2014, and the Supreme Court granted her bail for a limited period. The investigative officer who cracked this murder case by reviewing a video recording of the incident deserves appreciation. However, if Shuba had mustered the courage to confide in her father that she didn't like Girish and wouldn't be happy with him in her life, perhaps Girish would be alive today. Even if Shuba had shared her concerns with Girish, maybe he could have persuaded her father. The tragic irony of this story is that by the time Girish's killers were sentenced to life imprisonment, Girish's father had already passed away, leaving no one to find closure. With that, the Girish murder case finally comes to a close. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ayla Reynolds. Ayla Reynolds was born in Waterville, Maine on April 4, 2010. A beautiful girl with blonde hair, blue eyes and a captivating smile, she adored music and dancing. Her parents, Trista Reynolds and Justin Dietro, had a brief romance in 2009, leading to Trista's pregnancy. Though initially surprised, Justin's resemblance to Ayla was undeniable. A paternity test in 2010 made him accept his parenthood. Consequently, in December, he was ordered to provide child support. Trista and Justin didn't have a custody agreement, but Trista, who lived in Portland, had primary custody of Ayla, thanks to an arrangement between them. Only in mid-2011, after Ayla's first birthday, did Justin start having visits with her. He lived an hour and a half away, and the encounters were during the day and very brief. They agreed he could occasionally take Ayla with him, but never overnight. After giving birth to Ayla, Trista became pregnant again with her fiancé Raymond's child. In 2011, Ayla welcomed a baby brother, Raymond Jr. However, Trista's life took a dramatic turn on October 13, 2011, when she had a run-in with Child Services. They issued her an ultimatum: get substance abuse treatment or risk losing custody of her children. Trista opted for rehab, leaving Ayla and Raymond Jr. in the care of her mom and sister, determined to reunite with them and avoid losing them permanently. By October 2011, Justin had met with Ayla around 5 to 10 times. However, just 4 days after Trista's funeral, on October 17th, Justin and his family suddenly decided to seek custody of Ayla. Justin's mother, Phoebe DiPetro, got in touch with Child Protective Services and was granted permission to take Ayla into their care. The authorities quickly informed Trista's relatives of their decision. However, when Ayla's aunt was told she had to hand Ayla over, she strongly opposed the decision, alleging that Justin had a history of abusing the child. The officials countered that a father's custody rights take precedence over those of an aunt. Once permission was granted, Justin and his family went to pick up Ayla from her Aunt Jessica's house, but they didn't know the address. Child protection officials provided the location, and a police officer, Charles Weaver, accompanied Justin and his mother to the house. The paternal grandmother waited in the car while Justin and the officer went to the door. When they arrived, Jessica begged the officer not to take Ayla away and warned that she wouldn't give her up willingly. The officer noted that Ayla seemed happy and carefree at first, laughing and playing. However, Jessica pointed out that Ayla's behavior changed dramatically when Justin approached. As soon as Ayla saw her father, she burst into tears and tried to get away from him. Despite this, the officer took Ayla from Jessica and handed her over to Justin. The child struggled and screamed, even trying to bite the officer when she was placed in her father's arms. Jessica told Officer Charles that Ayla was terrified of Justin and that they couldn't take her away from her. Charles explained that he sympathized, but as a police officer, he had to enforce the directive from Child Services, and it wasn't his decision to make. To clarify, if Justin had wanted primary physical custody of Ayla, he would have needed to either reach an agreement with her mother or go through a court process to get a judge's approval. However, as we saw in the custody exchange, there was no agreement or court involvement. Instead, a Child Protective Services supervisor made a judgment, but failed to consider the mother's own arrangements for the child to stay with her relatives during her temporary absence. Before a court grants a parent exclusive physical custody, they typically evaluate the situation thoroughly, including background checks and home visits, which did not happen in Ayla's case. In custody cases, the child's best interest should always come first. However, there was reportedly no evidence to support the decision that was made. Many analysts believe that only an imminent danger to the child's safety could outweigh the stability and continuity of staying with her maternal relatives. If Child Protective Services officials believed Ayla was at risk, it's unclear why they only removed Ayla and not her little brother Raymond as well. The father took Ayla to his childhood home in Waterville, where he lived with his mother Phoebe, 47, his sister Alicia, 24, and her baby daughter Gabriella, who like Ayla was an infant at the time. Justin, 25, lived in the partially finished basement, a single large room, while the rest of the family occupied the upstairs area. During Trista's rehabilitation, she called Justin every day to speak with Ayla and ensure everything was going smoothly. She did not perceive any warning signs during these conversations. On October 20th, 2011, coinciding with the 8th day of Trista's treatment, a meeting was held to discuss Ayla's case. Attendees included Child Protective Services members, 2 doctors, Trista, her sister Jessica, and their lawyer, as well as Justin, who participated via phone. This meeting resulted in an agreement that Ayla would be returned to her mother on October 22, 2011, upon Trista's completion of the addiction recovery program. It was also agreed that Justin would bring Ayla to the treatment center for a visit on the 21st. Things were going well for Trista, but the situation was about to take a turn. None of the established agreements were fulfilled, leaving Trista desperate to regain custody of her daughter. She repeatedly reached out to Child Protective Services for assistance in enforcing the agreement, but to no avail. As a result, Trista sought a temporary compromise with Justin. He would continue to care for the child, and she would receive regular visitation rights. On November 12, 2011, Justin took the girl to the emergency room. Following a thorough examination, doctors diagnosed a broken bone in one of her joints, specifically the elbow joint that connects the upper arm to the elbow. Justin claimed the accident had occurred the previous night, on November 11th, stating that he slipped and fell on her while holding Ayla on the porch during a rainstorm. According to him, although she cried, there were no visible injuries, and it wasn't until the next morning that it became apparent she required urgent medical attention. By the next Monday, the orthopedist concluded that surgery would not be necessary, and the injury would likely heal on its own. A week later, on November 26th, the specialist reported during the third medical appointment that the child's progress was as expected. Trista attended this medical consultation to closely monitor her daughter's recovery, unaware that it would be the last time she would hold her in her arms. From that point on, the situation quickly deteriorated. Frustrated by the ongoing disputes over custody, visitation rights, and even her right to talk to her daughter on the phone, Trista decided to take action. On December 15, 2011, she filed court papers to initiate legal proceedings to gain full physical custody of Ayla. On Saturday, December 17th, 2 days later, Justin contacted the police in the morning to report that Ayla was missing from his mother's house, where he was living with his girlfriend Courtney Roberts and his sister Alicia. According to him, they had put the 20-month-old girl to bed the previous night, and when they woke up early that morning, she was no longer there. Trista was on her way to visit her boyfriend Raymond in a coastal city in Maine, just 50 miles from the Canadian border, when she received devastating news. She was dozing in the passenger seat while her father-in-law, Robert, drove. Robert took a call from Trista's father, who informed him that Trista's baby, Ayla, was missing. The news left Robert frozen, and he searched for a safe place to stop the car and wake Trista. Groggy, Trista listened as her father's voice came through the phone, informing her that her baby's whereabouts were unknown. Desperate, Trista changed course, heading to meet the police who were searching for Ayla. The 90-minute journey felt like an eternity to Trista, who frantically called Justin to find out what had happened, but her calls went unanswered, leaving her terrified. When they arrived at the police station, both Trista and Robert gave statements to the authorities. About 30 minutes later, Trista's father joined them, visibly angry and distressed. It turned out that Justin had called 911 that morning at 8:49 to report Ayla's disappearance. He claimed the last time someone saw Ayla was around 10 p.m. the previous night, when his sister Alicia checked on her before bed. However, on Saturday morning, they discovered Ayla was no longer in her crib, but Justin didn't specify the exact time of her disappearance in the call. Justin suspected that an unknown intruder had kidnapped the toddler. The news of Ayla's disappearance spread rapidly, and the authorities quickly launched an investigation. The police chief addressed the media, assuring them that the case was being thoroughly investigated and that their primary objective was to find Ayla by any means. The police searched the house for any potential clues that could lead them to Ayla, facilitating their operation. Meanwhile, the family stayed with friends, and a command center was set up to coordinate the search efforts. On the third day, Monday, December 19th, the FBI was requested to assist in the search operation. By this point, 75 individuals from various agencies were involved in the efforts. The state police seized 2 vehicles from the Petra residence, a 1996 Ford Explorer, owned by Justin, and a 4-door silver sedan, owned by Justin's girlfriend Courtney, who was present on the night of Ayla's disappearance. The search for Ayla expanded, with the FBI's child abduction team conducting door-to-door interviews. 75 officers worked tirelessly, investing 5,000 hours in 10 days, pursuing 330 leads. 50 civilian volunteers and a $30,000 reward aided the effort. Justin initially kept a low profile, avoiding media, However, he made more public appearances, including on the Today's Show, where he addressed the shift in law enforcement's message. He appealed to the perpetrator to return Ayla, emphasizing they had no right to keep her, and she needed to be with her family at home. Justin attributed his delayed cooperation to his initial naivety, having expected Ayla to return within a few weeks. He also stated that law enforcement had advised him to avoid the press, which was partially confirmed by the Department of Public Safety spokesperson. However, the spokesperson clarified that this guidance was only provided at the beginning of the investigation. Subsequently, the police actually encouraged Ayla's parents to remain in the public eye. Justin took the opportunity to respond to the insinuations against him, inviting the TV host to spend a day with him to gain first-hand experience of his situation. While he praised the police's efforts, he acknowledged that some of their methods were unpleasant. He emphasized that the truth remains the same, regardless of how many times he was asked the same questions and accused of lying, believing that the truth will eventually emerge. By the end of January, police discovered Ayla's blood in several areas of the DPO house and announced their findings. Although there was not enough evidence to make arrests, 3 adults, including Justin, Courtney, and Elisha, who lived in the residence where Ayla was last seen, were suspects. According to Stephen McCausland, spokesperson for the Department of Public Safety, the forensic evidence contradicted the family's story of what happened, making it highly unlikely that someone could have taken Ayla from her bedroom without one of the 3 adults in the house noticing. 6 months after Ayla's disappearance was reported on May 30th, 2012, the police announced that it was unlikely the little girl was still alive. Trista's family invited journalists into their home to watch the press conference where this news was delivered. Trista broke down in tears, and her grief soon turned to anger as she accused Justin of killing her baby. For Trista's family, learning the details of forensic tests conducted at Justin's family's house was extremely difficult. They already knew that Ayla's blood had been found, and they had been told the amount was equivalent to 25% of her blood volume. However, they had not seen the evidence until January 2013, when everything was finally revealed to them. The investigation uncovered disturbing evidence. The baby seat in Justin's 1996 Ford Explorer had Ayla's blood on the left shoulder strap. Dried gastric fluid was found on the back seats. In Ayla's bedroom, blood was discovered on her princess pink sneakers next to her crib, as well as on the face and arms of her doll. Investigators believed Ayla might have tried to wipe blood from her mouth with her toy. Additionally, a blood stain was found on the living room sofa. Most of the blood traces were found in the basement. On the mattress where Justin slept with Courtney, a pool of Ayla's blood was discovered. Nearby on the bed, vomit and an unidentified pink fiber, possibly from a toy, were found next to the sneakers stained with Ayla's blood on the tongue and inside. Additionally, splashes of blood were found on the cement floor around the bed and on the walls, with some of the splashes on the walls matching Ayla's height. An expert concluded that some of the blood drops, about the size of a dime, were indicative of trauma caused by a blunt object. The experts also determined that some blood spatter patterns in the house might have been coughed up by Ayla, suggesting that she had both internal and external injuries. The police found that bed linens had been used to clean up Ayla's blood. This information was horrific for Trista and her family to learn, and they soon discovered even more disturbing details. Officers warned Trista about disturbing evidence, then showed her luminol test results revealing hidden bloodstains at her house. She was devastated, fled the station in panic, and became convinced Ayla was murdered, declining to see more evidence. Justin showed no emotion when police showed him and the Petro family evidence months prior. The family they stayed with during the relocation also declined to see photos, citing disinterest. Justin's girlfriend, who was with him the night Ayla disappeared, had the same indifferent reaction to the findings. Trista spoke out 8 months after the 2013 ordeal, slam-dunking Justin, Alicia, and Courtney for being free and unbothered. In a blistering letter, she shared evidence and photos, refusing to wait for justice, vowing to revive public interest with or without law enforcement's backing. In 2016, journalists visited Justin's mom's house, meeting Alicia, Ayla's aunt. Queried about blood evidence, Alicia blamed Ayla's lactose intolerance, citing vomiting. However, internet research showed this was unlikely, as typical symptoms are gas, bloating, and diarrhea, not vomiting blood. In 2017, a judge granted Trista's request and formally declared Ayla legally deceased. The ruling stated that Ayla's death likely occurred on or around December 17, 2011, the day her father, Justin, reported her missing. With this ruling in place, Trista and her legal team pursued a wrongful death lawsuit against Justin, alleging that his intentional and unlawful actions led to Ayla's death, and that he subjected her to pain, terror, and physical harm prior to her passing. Trista held a press conference, confronting her deceased daughter's father after he denied wrongdoing in a lawsuit. She questioned his conscience, saying she saw the truth in his eyes and believed he knew it was a problem. In 2023, a judge granted Trista's request to add Phoebe and Elisha as defendants in the wrongful death lawsuit. The three defendants now face civil charges for wrongful death, conscious pain and suffering, and unlawfully interfering with a deceased person's body. Additionally, Justin is charged with breaching his parental duty to care for a minor child. Trista and her lawyer knew they wouldn't get money from Justin. They wanted to uncover the truth about Ayla's disappearance. It was suspicious, with Justin driving to Portland and back, claiming to search for Ayla, but never contacting Trista or her family. He had bought a $25,000 life insurance policy for Ayla weeks before. It's bizarre that Justin stayed at a friend's house while detectives investigated Ayla's disappearance. This is especially surprising, given that Justin had barely been involved in his baby's life during the 9 months of pregnancy, and most of her life. Trista also shared that she received strange messages from Justin in the week after he took Ayla, in which he expressed fear that someone might kidnap or snatch her. He had made similar comments around December 11th, 6 days before her disappearance was reported. However, after Ayla went missing, those messages took on a threatening and confusing tone. Trista admitted that she had always been perplexed by their meaning. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shelby Von Holt. Shelby Von Holt was born on September 7, 2000 in Fort Wayne, Indiana, USA, as a cheerful young girl. She was the second of 5 children in her family, which consisted of her mother, Shah Hartman, father, Von Holt, older sister, Peyton Hartman, and younger siblings, Devin Von Holt and Isaac Von Holt. Shelby graduated from Troy Center High School in 2018 and spent the next 2 years working at a steakhouse and other places. During this time, she was contemplating her desired career path and seemed to be leaning towards a therapeutic field, although she had not yet decided on the exact specialty. As a 20-year-old, Shelby was living life to the fullest, known for her cheerful personality that made her the life of every party. She loved to smile, dance, sing, and spend time with friends. Notably, she was living independently, although the reasons for this were unclear. While she was not active on most social media platforms, she frequently posted cheerful photos on Facebook, many of which featured moments shared with her young niece, Camila, who is the daughter of her older sister, Peyton. According to her mother, Shelby met Valerie Rose Hardick, a 22-year-old woman, on Facebook. Although they reportedly did not have a close relationship, Valerie's life is shrouded in mystery, with rumors of a troubled childhood, questionable associations, and potential mental health challenges. On June 20, 2021, at 6:48 p.m., a 911 dispatcher received a distress call from a woman who managed to convey that she was injured and claimed Valerie shot her. Although it's unclear whether the woman provided her address or if the police traced the call. Officers from the Fort Wayne Police Department arrived at Shelby's residence shortly after. Upon arrival, the officers forced entry into the residence and found Shelby barely conscious, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds, and surrounded by a large pool of blood. One officer stayed with Shelby while the others conducted a protective sweep of the residence to ensure no other victims were present and that the perpetrator was not still inside. They did this while waiting for an ambulance and local firefighters to arrive. During this time, the officers attempted to provide first aid, and a surgeon asked Shelby if she knew who had shot her. Shelby identified Valerie as the attacker. Emergency medical personnel soon took over Shelby's care, rushing her to the nearby hospital, where she was in critical condition, but still alive. Meanwhile, Shelby's family was informed of the incident, and Fort Wayne Police Department officers began gathering evidence from her home. A doorbell camera was a significant piece of evidence, and after reviewing its footage, a person of interest was identified, though details were not publicly disclosed at the time. In a remarkable coincidence, a disturbing incident took place the day after Shelby's critical injury, approximately 50 kilometers away in Ohio. At around 10:30 a.m., the local police department received multiple calls about a suspicious-looking young woman lurking around a convenience store at a gas station. According to eyewitnesses, she had been wandering around the store and near the gas pumps for about an hour, seemingly trying to catch a glimpse of customers' credit card numbers as they made their purchases. Furthermore, the police had already received a prior call from a man who reported seeing the same woman earlier at the convenience store, claiming that she had pointed a gun at his back. After taking precautions, police officers arrived at the gas station where they found the woman and arrested her without any violence. The 22-year-old woman was identified as Valerie Rose Hardick. She had a 9mm handgun on her, which was the same type of weapon used in the attack on Shelby. Shelby had already identified her attacker as Valerie, which made the police even more certain they had the right person. The car Valerie was driving was the same one captured on Shelby's doorbell camera, leaving the scene just before Shelby called for help. Although the investigation is ongoing, Valerie was taken into custody and transferred to the county jail, where she will await her court hearing in the local municipal court. Shelby was clinging to life after being gravely injured by 89mm bullet wounds to her chest and abdomen. Doctors placed her in an induced coma and did everything they could to save her. Unfortunately, 3 days after the brutal attack on June 22, 2021, Shelby's body gave in to the injuries, and she was pronounced dead. According to her mother and media reports, Shelby died after undergoing 4 complex abdominal surgeries that did not yield the desired results. She received 20 blood transfusions, but the medical outlook was always bleak. If Shelby had survived, doctors believed her legs would have needed to be amputated. The brutal murder raises questions about what could drive someone to commit such a heinous crime. According to the limited information available, investigators attributed the motive to jealousy. It is alleged that Shelby was dating a man who Valerie was strongly attached to, although his identity was not revealed. Valerie was charged with criminal assault and aggravated threats. Initially held in Ohio on a $100,000 bail for threatening a man with a firearm at a gas station, Valerie was later transferred to Allen County to face charges for Shelby's murder. Shelby Von Holt's remains were memorialized in a private ceremony at a funeral home on June 29, 2021, and then cremated. In early 2022, Valerie Rose Hardick entered a plea deal in connection with Shelby's murder. Hardick pleaded guilty, citing mental illness as a defense. As part of the deal, the prosecution dropped a charge related to the use of a firearm during the crime, which could have added 20 years to her sentence. In September 2022, Hardick's sentencing hearing took place in the Superior Court of Allen County. As agreed, she pleaded guilty but mentally ill. During the hearing, her defense attorney presented mitigating circumstances, including her difficult upbringing marked by her stepmother's death, abuse by her stepbrother, and a history of mental health issues. However, the prosecutors emphasized the jealousy motive behind Shelby's murder and highlighted Hardick's criminal history, which had escalated over time. They also noted that Hardick was on probation at the time of the murder, having been part of an alternative program due to previous charges. Throughout the hearing, Valerie's behavior was inconsistent. At times, she seemed coherent and fully aware of the situation, but at other moments, she appeared nervous, distracted, and even smiled at Shelby's family. Despite this, she answered the court's questions accurately. Although the exact content of her statements was not specified in media reports, it was noted that she never expressed remorse or apologized to Shelby's family. Shelby's parents, on the other hand, poignantly conveyed their profound loss during their victim impact statements. Shelby's father reminisced about his daughter's love for symbolic icons like peace signs and how she was still finding her way in life at the time of her murder. He reflected on Valerie's demeanor during her guilty plea, stating that her voice conveyed a lack of remorse. The grieving father asserted that by admitting to intentionally killing Shelby, Valerie seemed to take pride in her crime, which demonstrated a clear lack of regret. Toby expressed his belief that there was more to the story behind Valerie's motivation for killing Shelby than just jealousy, and he referenced the defense's argument about Valerie's mental health issues. Shelby's father pointed out that many people in prison have mental health issues, and he vowed to continue seeking answers about the tragedy. In a heartfelt reflection, Toby noted that there were two tragedies in this case. The first was the shocking and agonizing death of his daughter, and the second was Valerie's decision to throw away her future in a fit of rage. He acknowledged that Valerie's children would greatly suffer as a result. It was revealed that Valerie, who was 22 years old, had at least 2 children, although no further details about them were publicly disclosed. The grieving father said that the tragedy wouldn't stop at the graveyard or in the courtroom, because true justice couldn't be achieved in such a tragic situation. However, he said he had forgiven Valerie in order to find peace within himself, which he believed was guided by his faith in Christ. He was confident that Shelby was with God and reiterated his deep love for her. Shelby's mother, Shauna, also spoke about her feelings. She remembered her daughter as a princess from the day she was born, describing her as a kind spirit who would always help a friend, no matter the distance. Shauna vowed to attend all possible appeal hearings that Valerie's defense might initiate in the future. She shared the pain of remembering her lifeless daughter and the helplessness she felt, unable to protect her. All she could do was lay her head on Shelby's chest as her daughter lay in a medically induced coma. She publicly praised her daughter's courage, saying that Shelby had managed to name her attacker twice and fought hard for her life after being attacked. Shauna detailed the severe injuries Shelby suffered, explaining that her heart was racing at an unsustainable pace. Although Shelby's medical expenses totaled nearly $500,000, Shauna didn't seek compensation because they were waived following her death. The funeral expenses alone were around $115,000, but Shauna emphasized that she didn't expect to receive any compensation and didn't want any money from Valerie. Holding back tears, Shelby's mother poignantly expressed that memories were all she had left, and she wished she could trade places with her daughter. She noted that some days, the grief was so intense that she couldn't muster the strength to get up. After the legal representatives finished their presentations and the victim's family statements, the court awaited the judge's verdict. Under Indiana law, the sentence could range from a minimum of 45 years to a maximum of 65 years, with an average of 55 years. Valerie's defense team requested the minimum sentence, citing various mitigating factors, while the prosecution sought the maximum sentence. Before making his decision, the judge pointed out that it was clear the murder was planned in advance, and Valerie was fully aware of her actions. Her decision to flee to Ohio further supported this. While the judge acknowledged that Valerie had a difficult upbringing, marked by inadequate education, personal traumas, and mental health issues, he emphasized that she already had a growing criminal record at the time of Shelby's murder, including pending charges for a separate crime. Despite her past attempts at rehabilitation, her criminal history and lack of success in those attempts meant her traumatic past could not be used as an excuse. Taking these factors into account, the judge sentenced the 23-year-old Valerie to the maximum possible sentence of 65 years in prison. He also ordered the destruction of the weapon used in the murder. According to the American Correctional System's records, Valerie is currently incarcerated in an Indiana women's prison, with the earliest estimated release date being June 18, 2027, at which time she will be 72 years old. After the court session, Shelby's parents said they were satisfied with the verdict. However, they later made it clear that no verdict could ease their pain, especially since Valerie would be spending her days in prison. Shelby's mother emphasized that she would always miss and remember her daughter. This case is particularly notable because the victim, who was mortally wounded, was able to identify her killer. A prosecutor not involved in the case explained that when a dying victim identifies their attacker, this is known as a dying declaration. These statements provide a crucial lead for detectives and are the only exception to the hearsay rule in court trials, ensuring that the most reliable evidence is presented. The prosecutor also stressed that dying declarations are admissible in court because they tend to produce more trustworthy statements, given the immense pressure and tragic circumstances surrounding them. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Yarborough. Sarah Yarborough was born in Portland on June 12, 1975. Shortly after, her parents relocated to Federal Way, a suburb of Seattle, where she grew up with two siblings, forming a strong bond with her youngest brother. From an early age, Sarah demonstrated a keen interest in music and ballet, spending considerable time honing her skills. Her academic prowess earned her a spot in a school program that allowed her to travel to New Zealand twice. As she entered her teenage years, Sarah joined the cheerleading team at her high school, where she developed a large social circle. She was renowned for her kind and compassionate nature, often lending a helping hand to those in need. On Saturday, December 14, 1991, 16-year-old Sarah was supposed to meet her cheerleading team at the school building, where a bus would pick them up for an event. She drove her father's car to the school, but arrived at the wrong time, thinking the bus would arrive at 8 a.m. when it was actually scheduled for 9 a.m. As her friends gradually arrived at the meeting point, they couldn't find Sarah anywhere. Some students noticed her car in the parking lot, but she wasn't inside. Even when the bus arrived, Sarah was still missing. Her friends found this strange, but they had no way to contact her since they didn't have mobile phones at the time. Around the same time, two 12-year-old children were exploring the wooded area behind the tennis courts on the school grounds when they noticed something unusual. A man emerged from behind the bushes, took a breath, and walked away in the opposite direction. Although the children found this odd, they didn't pay much attention and continued walking. A few meters ahead, they stumbled upon a horrifying sight. A young woman lying unresponsive on the ground, who they thought might be dead. The children rushed back home to tell their parents, and one of the children's parents returned to the scene with them. Meanwhile, the other child's father decided to follow the suspicious man they had seen earlier. The child remembered seeing a car that resembled a Chevrolet Nova leaving the area, and since he lived near the school, his father decided to try to locate that car. After a while, he spotted a similar car, but unfortunately, he quickly lost sight of it and was unable to find it again. At the same time, the parents of the other child rushed to the school, where they discovered the young woman lying on the ground, likely dead. They promptly entered the school building and contacted the police. Upon arrival, the officers confirmed the young woman's death. They also quickly identified her as Sarah. The police deduced that the victim had been strangled based on the marks on her neck. Some of her personal belongings, including her jacket, underwear, and socks, were found nearby. However, her purse and car keys were discovered in the school parking lot, leading investigators to suspect that the assailant might have attacked her near her vehicle and then dragged her behind the trees. The body was sent to forensic experts for examination, and the police initiated their search for evidence. As a first step, they interviewed everyone who was in the school premises and its surrounding area. The two boys who discovered Sarah provided a rough description of the man who emerged from behind the bushes near her body. They described him as a tall, approximately 20-year-old man with shoulder-length, reddish hair, wearing a dark coat and black trousers. Soon, the police located another witness, and this is where the story takes a surprising turn. A man out for a run observed a strange scene in the same wooded area. He saw a girl lying next to the bushes, with a man hovering over her. The girl was completely still, and the witness initially thought the couple was engaging in intimate behavior in that spot. However, when he ran back through the area in the opposite direction a few minutes later, both the man and the girl were still there, in the same positions. At no point did he suspect that a serious crime was being committed. The witness, a recent immigrant to the United States from a different cultural background, was uncertain about typical behavior in the country. Despite this, he was able to provide the police with a rough description of the attacker, which matched the accounts given by the children who found Sarah's body. The police interviewed dozens of people who had been near the school, but no other useful information came to light. The medical examiners who performed the autopsy on Sarah's body determined that the cause of death was strangulation. It appeared that the attacker had used his own socks to strangle her. A severe head wound was also found, and experts believed that Sarah had lost consciousness due to this blow, which correlated with the runner's account of seeing her lying motionless on the ground. Forensic experts analyzed Sarah's clothing and discovered traces of male DNA on nearly all her garments. However, at that time, in 1991, there was no DNA database to match these samples against, so investigators had to rely on direct comparisons with DNA samples from specific suspects. Another significant finding was that although forensic experts found male DNA on Sarah's clothing, the forensic doctor reported no signs of sexual assault on her body. Based on this information, investigators pieced together their own theory of what happened. Since Sarah had arrived at the school almost an hour early, and she was alone in the parking lot, it's likely that her attacker saw her, waited for her to leave the car, struck her on the head with an object, causing her to lose consciousness. The attacker then dragged her body behind some trees, where it was later found. The assailant removed some of her clothing, engaged in inappropriate acts, and eventually strangled her using her own socks. When the children who found Sarah's body reported the car they thought the attacker had fled in, detectives started searching for a Chevrolet Nova. They soon found one, but the driver proved to have an alibi. He had just delivered donuts that morning, and his DNA didn't match the DNA on Sarah's clothes. It seemed the kids had simply seen the car driving by and mistakenly assumed the killer was inside. In fact, none of them could recall for certain whether they had seen a man get into a car from the bushes. In the days that followed, police continued to search for witnesses and new leads, but made no significant progress. Despite the horror of the event, classes resumed on Monday. The fact that the murder had occurred just a short distance from their school, and the killer remained at large with no known identity, added to the unease. Afraid to walk alone, the girls were escorted to their cars or buses by the boys from the sports teams, ensuring they weren't left alone on the street. Approximately 70 potential witnesses were present at the school and its surroundings on the morning of the incident. Investigators interviewed each of them, but unfortunately, no new information came to light. Based on the accounts of the two children and the runner, a composite sketch of the attacker was created and circulated to local newspapers and television stations. The case received widespread media attention, and over the next few weeks, the police received hundreds of testimony. Each tip was thoroughly investigated, but in every instance, it led to a dead end. One promising lead involved a man who matched the suspect's description and had a criminal record. However, his DNA did not match the sample found on the victim's clothing, and the lead was eventually ruled out. The case remained stagnant for months, with the police dealing with a staggering 4,000 tips, but lacking the resources to effectively follow up on each one. As new cases emerged monthly, the investigators' attention was increasingly divided, further hindering progress on the case. When Sarah's family learned that the police were struggling to manage the influx of tips, they stepped in to help in any way they could. One family member worked for a tech company and successfully lobbied the company's management to lend the police department a powerful computer worth $150,000 in the 1990s. This generous donation allowed the police to centralize and process the leads more efficiently, categorizing them for easy review. Despite their best efforts, however, every lead ultimately led to a dead end, and the case remained stagnant for years to come. 2 years later, Sarah's classmates prepared to graduate, and as a tribute to their friend, they raised a substantial amount of money to create a memorial in her honor. The memorial took the form of a bench featuring a metal casting of Sarah's belongings alongside a poignant photo of her dog reaching for her purse. Although the case was periodically reopened and re-examined in the years that followed, the outcome remained the same. The perpetrator remained at large. During this time, the police conducted thousands of interviews and collected DNA samples from nearly 300 potential suspects. But all these efforts ultimately proved fruitless. In 2011, 20 years after the murder, a detective decided to utilize modern technology to aid in the investigation. He contacted a genetic genealogy company, inquiring if they could help locate relatives of the individual who left DNA on the victim's body. The experts accepted the challenge, but unfortunately, they were unsuccessful. Two main factors contributed to their failure. Firstly, genetic genealogy was still in its early stages, and the experts' capabilities were limited. For instance, they couldn't simultaneously search for both male and female relatives from the same DNA sample. If the DNA was from a male, they could only search for male familial connections, and vice versa. Secondly, legal obstacles hindered their progress, as various laws prohibited the use of genetic data samples to search for relatives of suspects. The researchers the detective approached had spent years tracing the genetic family tree of the British passengers who arrived in the United States on the Mayflower in 1620. By analyzing the DNA of Sarah's attacker, they found a link to one of the ship's passengers, Robert Fuller. However, tracking the attacker's lineage proved extremely difficult, especially considering the passage of time. Although the Mayflower had only around 100 passengers, their descendants now number over 25 million. Despite the initial setback, this was the first time genetic genealogy had been used to solve a crime. The detective gathered available information and identified several local residents with the surname Fuller. He showed them pictures of the men, but none were recognized by the witnesses, including a runner and 2 men who had stumbled upon the body as children. Next, the detective collected DNA samples from all the local Fullers and sent them to the lab. Although none of the samples matched the attacker's DNA, one surprising discovery emerged. One of the men was a distant descendant of Robert Fuller from the Mayflower. However, he was not the killer and had no knowledge of any distant relatives living nearby. The detective retired in 2017, and a new team of investigators took over the case. In 2011, a company had taken over the study of the DNA sample from the assailant, and the new team reached out to them. Given the significant advancements in genetic material study capabilities, The experts agreed to try to trace the assailant's lineage. Over the next 2 years, they painstakingly worked through public databases to find even the most distant relatives of the assailant, then manually traced their family connections to individuals who lived during the time of Sarah's death. After eliminating several thousand individuals, they finally got a break in September 2019. They identified 2 new potential suspects, brothers Edward and Patrick Nicholas, who were descendants of Robert Fuller. The experts concluded that it was highly probable that a DNA sample found on Sarah's clothing belonged to one of the brothers at the time of the murder. The older brother, Edward, was a career criminal with a long history of violent offenses, and his DNA profile was already in the FBI database, ruling him out as a suspect in Sarah's murder. The younger brother, Patrick Nicholas, had also been arrested multiple times for violent crimes, but his DNA sample was not in the database because it was collected before the DNA profiles of offenders were added. The detectives put 55-year-old Patrick under surveillance right away. 2 days later, they got their chance. Patrick went to the laundromat, and while waiting for his clothes to wash, he stepped outside to smoke a cigarette. When he was done, he carelessly threw the butt on the ground. One of the officers quickly picked it up and put it in an evidence bag, then returned to his car. Patrick repeated this process, stepping outside to smoke again, and this time a cloth handkerchief accidentally fell out of his pocket. The police thought it wise to take this second piece of evidence, just in case they couldn't get a DNA sample from the cigarette butt. As it turned out, the forensic experts had no problem obtaining samples from both items. The next day, they had the long-awaited news for the detective. Patrick's DNA matched the traces found on Sarah's clothing back in 1991 perfectly. The judge immediately issued a warrant for Patrick's arrest, and the police took him into custody. It took investigators 5 days to identify the suspect and formally charge him with murder. Once his biography was made public, an obvious question arose. Why had a man with such a criminal history not been considered a suspect for 28 years? Patrick Nicholas, at 19, had attempted to assault a young woman who managed to escape by jumping into a river and swimming to safety. He was later arrested and spent 4 years in prison. In 1994, he was arrested again for trying to assault a minor, but his DNA was not recorded in any database because the charge was not serious enough. Over the next 3 decades, his name never surfaced during investigations, and he didn't appear in over 4,000 leads. It was eventually revealed that genetic genealogy experts couldn't trace him back to Robert Fuller because Patrick was adopted and grew up with a different surname. One of the men who discovered Sarah's body when they were children in 1991 immediately asserted that Patrick was undoubtedly the same killer. He admitted that the incident had deeply affected him, as he was only 12 years old when the body was discovered, and the perpetrator had seen his face for many years. The witness lived in constant fear that the killer would come after him, and only after Patrick's arrest did he finally feel safe. Patrick's trial did not start until 2023. Despite claiming innocence, the main piece of evidence, his DNA on the victim's clothing, was a major obstacle. His lawyer attempted to argue that the presence of Patrick's DNA did not necessarily mean he was guilty, but this claim was dismissed. The lawyer also questioned the accuracy of the DNA analysis, but experts deemed this entirely unreliable. In the end, Patrick was found guilty of first-degree murder without premeditation on May 25th. He received a prison sentence of 45 years and 8 months, effectively ensuring he would never be released. At the sentencing, Patrick remained emotionless, in contrast to Sarah's family, who thanked the judge, trial participants, and investigators for bringing the killer to justice after 28 years of evasion. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jessica Camilleri. Jessica Camilleri, the second daughter of Rita and Vince, an Australian Maltese couple, was born with a mild mental disability. Her IQ was between 55 and 60, placing her in the bottom 1% of the population. People with mild intellectual disability like Jessica learn to communicate and express themselves, but at a slower pace than others. They may take longer to develop skills like speaking, reading, writing, and math, but they can still adapt to daily life. Due to her condition, Jessica was slow in reaching developmental milestones like walking, talking, and coordinating movements. She started school much later than her peers, which made her a target for teasing, discomfort, and bullying from her classmates for being different. As a result, Jessica developed stress, anxiety, and anger, particularly towards females. She also struggled with intermittent explosive disorder, characterized by sudden, repeated outbursts of impulsive, aggressive, and violent behavior, as well as angry verbal eruptions that were disproportionate to the situation. At school, Jessica exhibited aggressive behavior towards both students and teachers, including a notable incident where she punched a male student and refused to release her grip, leading to her indefinite suspension and subsequent confinement at home under the care of her mother, Rita, who received a disability pension to support her. Jessica's behavioral issues were symptomatic of her intellectual disability and struggled with irrational outbursts of anger. Furthermore, she was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, a chronic brain condition that affects millions of children worldwide, making it challenging for her to regulate her behavior. In addition to these conditions, Jessica also suffered from severe bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, and autism spectrum disorders, which impacted her judgment, self-awareness, and empathy towards others. She had obsessive tendencies, such as fixating on her 3 favorite numbers, 2, 3, and 5, each of which she associated with a specific color, yellow, green, and purple, respectively. Jessica would often repeat these numbers to generate random phone numbers, which she would then use to call and talk to men. In one instance, starting in 2018, she began harassing the staff of a meat company in Daylesford, England, even going so far as to threaten the owner's family, claiming she would decapitate them with a chainsaw. Jessica had a persistent fascination with horror movies, particularly the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. She would spend hours rewatching disturbing videos, and this obsession often led to furious outbursts when her mother, Rita, tried to restrict her access to these films. Jessica and her mother lived together in a house in St. Clair, a suburb of Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. Jessica's father, Vince, had divorced Rita during her teenage years due to the strain their daughter's behavioral problems had put on their marriage. Jessica struggled with low self-esteem and a childish, naive outlook, but she also displayed strong narcissistic tendencies. Deep down, she felt she was one of a kind and entitled to special treatment due to her mental disability. This occasionally led her to be exploitative and egocentric. Despite this, Rita remained devoted to caring for her daughter, acknowledging her issues, but feeling a strong sense of responsibility to look after and protect her. Rita even went so far as to reach out and apologize to one of the recipients of Jessica's harassing phone calls, confessing that she was at a loss for how to manage her daughter's behavior. Jessica was very close to her mother, who dedicated her life to taking care of her and meeting all her needs. Instead of sending her to a psychiatric institution for full-time care, her mother chose to keep her at home. In fact, Rita's life revolved around Jessica. The tragic event of July 20th, 2019 was not a standalone incident. In the 6 years leading up to it, Jessica had been convicted twice for assaults that caused actual bodily harm. She had also physically attacked her aunt and her sister's mother-in-law by pulling their hair. But she avoided jail time and was always placed in the care of her mother, Rita, the one person who could tolerate her behavior. Jessica had also exhibited aggressive behavior towards women she encountered in the streets and shopping centers, lashing out at those she perceived as looking at her wrongly or making her feel ashamed. On one occasion, she was even barred from a doctor's office after becoming violent towards another patient in the waiting room due to paranoia. In early 2018, Jessica's aggressive behavior continued when she attacked a nurse during a hospital visit with her mother Rita. As a result, she was admitted to a mental health unit for 9 days to treat a severe episode of mood disorder. She was prescribed lithium for her supposed bipolar disorder, along with antipsychotic medications. However, by the end of 2018, about 6 months before the tragic event, Jessica had stopped taking her medication and instead began using natural remedies to manage her conditions. Rita was at her wit's end and paid $2,500 to a medium on Queen Street in St. Mary's, a western suburb of Sydney, in a desperate bid to exorcise the demon she believed was possessing her daughter Jessica. Despite her family and friends warning her about the dangers of living with Jessica, Rita remained adamant that her daughter wouldn't hurt anyone. According to Christy, Jessica's older sister, their mother Rita had a heart of gold, always putting others before herself, including Jessica, who continually refused to seek professional help. Rita's sister often voiced her concerns that Jessica might harm her, recognizing Rita's unconditional love for her daughter. However, Rita's motherly love made her oblivious to these warnings, even on the day before the tragic attack, when she had to take Jessica to a police station due to her threatening calls to strangers. Jessica felt humiliated by her mom in a parking lot after visiting her sister due to a stranger's brief presence. Later, when her mom refused to order food from Red Rooster, Jessica called the restaurant 3 times. She then demanded her mom call a doctor, but Jessica's erratic behavior scared him off. At wit's end, Rita called an ambulance to take Jessica to a mental health facility. On the night of July 20th, 2019, Jessica's most severe episode of rage was about to unfold. In a brutal attack, Jessica dragged her 57-year-old mother Rita by the hair to the kitchen of their own home. There, she savagely attacked Rita with 7 meat cleavers, 4 of which broke under the force of her blows. In total, Jessica stabbed Rita over 100 times in the head and neck, driven by a morbid curiosity fueled by her daily obsession with horror films. The autopsy revealed the full extent of Rita's injuries, which included massive trauma to her head and neck, and death by multiple stab wounds that resulted in decapitation at the 2nd vertebrae in her upper neck. Furthermore, Rita's body showed over 90 defensive wounds, indicating that she was conscious for a significant part of the attack. Enduring extreme physical pain and emotional terror at the hands of her own daughter, whom she had lovingly cared for. Jessica's 4-year-old nephew, the son of her older sister Christy, was present during the attack. The boy had been in Rita's care for a few days due to Jessica's apparent improvement. However, he was forced to witness Jessica repeatedly stabbing his grandmother and ultimately decapitating her. When the boy tried to intervene, Jessica attacked him, causing a minor head injury. The traumatic scene was so disturbing that the young boy began vomiting in response. Jessica called the emergency number from her mother Rita's cell phone, confessing to her murder and claiming self-defense, stating that Rita had attacked her first. However, this was not true, and Jessica had actually committed the brutal act. In reality, after killing her mother, Jessica panicked and repeatedly stabbed Rita's lifeless body, ultimately decapitating her and inflicting over 100 wounds. She then dumped Rita's head in a nearby neighbor's front yard. When the police arrived at their St. Clair, Sydney home, Jessica was outside, her clothes stained with her mother's blood, holding a water bottle. She showed no remorse for her actions and was more concerned about her own fate. Jessica asked the police officers and detectives if it was possible to bring someone back to life after decapitation, believing in the possibility of medical miracles that could reattach her mother's head. The police officer responded that this idea was unrealistic, but Jessica insisted, thinking that doctors could perform miraculous surgeries and reattach her mother's head. She also inquired about the potential consequences of her actions, specifically asking if she would face the death penalty. Upon learning that Australia does not have capital punishment, Jessica felt relieved. Furthermore, Jessica confessed to the police that the idea of decapitating her mother came from the horror movies she obsessively watched. A police officer's body camera recorded a chilling conversation at the crime scene on July 20, 2019. At 11:43 p.m., the first responders described the scene as one of the most horrific they had ever seen. The next day, July 21, 2019, Jessica appeared in court but didn't apply for bail. A friend explained that this was not surprising, as Jessica probably didn't understand the bail process. After a trial that highlighted her long history of mental illness, Jessica was found guilty of manslaughter in December 2020. She had pleaded not guilty to murder due to her disability. In early 2021, Jessica was sentenced to a maximum of 21 years and 7 months in prison. She will be eligible for parole after serving 16 years and 2 months, which would be September 19, 2035. The prosecutor argued that Rita's brutal murder was the culmination of a lifetime of escalating violence by Jessica, which started with hair-pulling and eventually led to a deadly explosive attack. The prosecutor also stated that Jessica posed a moderate to high risk of reoffending and remained a danger to the community. Christy, Jessica's older sister, said that Jessica had killed and butchered their mother, and for that, she could never forgive her. However, Rita's sister held a different view, hoping that Jessica would get the help she needed and that Rita could finally rest in peace, knowing that Jessica was being cared for by a system that had failed her when she was alive. The judge presiding over the case offered counseling services to the jury members, recognizing that the disturbing evidence they had heard could haunt them long after the trial. The judge also admitted that selecting a jury for Jessica's trial was difficult, as many people were reluctant to participate in a trial involving such a disturbing crime. The judge described Rita's murder as one of the most brutal and cruel cases of homicide a court could encounter, emphasizing that the crime's severity was exacerbated by its occurrence in the victim's own home. Jessica's lawyer revealed that his client had expressed regret in a letter to her family after the crime. In the letter, Jessica accepted responsibility for her mother's death, acknowledging that Rita had not provoked her and taking blame for her actions. However, one of the psychiatrists who evaluated Jessica noted that she struggled to communicate through social gestures and displayed a relatively flat affect. The psychiatrist found no evidence of schizophrenia or hallucinations in Jessica. The conclusion was that Jessica's risk factors could only be managed in the long term with a comprehensive mental health support plan. Since entering prison, Jessica has persistently caused trouble. Only 2 months after her arrival, on September 9, 2019, she got into a fight with another inmate over food trading and threw a teacup at them. Although she was charged with assault in local court the next day, she did not receive any additional punishment. On October 14, 2019, Jessica attacked another inmate, which resulted in her being placed in solitary confinement in her cell for 5 days. On November 3, 2019, she disobeyed an order, and on July 31, 2020, she damaged property, incurring a fine of $200 Australian dollars. Jessica was involved in another assault on November 21, 2020, which led to her being placed in solitary confinement for 7 days. In January 2021, she was convicted of common assault again, but did not receive any further punishment. Jessica has explained her behavior, saying that other prisoners make her life difficult, regardless of what she does or where she goes. She has also stated that prison life is tough and very different from the outside world. On May 15, 2023, Justice Peter Hamill of the Sydney Supreme Court rejected claims that Kaleri's original sentence was too harsh and that the judge who sentenced her had misjudged the severity of her crime. However, Justice Hamill did rule that Kaleri should be resentenced, a decision supported by Justices Christine Adamson and Richard Kavanaugh. The basis for this decision was Kaleri's bizarre behavior, including walking into the street with her mother's head and asking emergency responders if they could reattach it, which demonstrated how out of touch with reality her actions were. After considering the opinions of multiple psychiatrists and a psychologist, Justice Hamill found that Caleri's intellectual disability and autism spectrum disorder meant she only had a basic understanding of what was morally wrong. As a result, he ordered that she be sentenced to 16 years in prison, with a minimum of 12 years before being eligible for parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jessica Bardwell. A team of detectives and FBI agents visited a remote ranch in Farmersville, North Texas, in the evening, and they immediately began searching the wooded area. They soon found a piece of metal covering something, and nearby there was an overwhelming smell of decay. Although the smell was unbearable, the officers were prepared for what they might find. When they removed the metal, they found a female body wrapped in a blue sheet, covered with a blanket and 2 red and gold towels stained with blood. A pile of trash mixed with dirt served as a makeshift grave for the victim. It was clear that the perpetrator was inexperienced, as their attempts to hide the body only made it more noticeable. The condition of the body was terrible, having decomposed significantly under the scorching sun for a week. It took experts 7 days to officially identify the victim, and they did so by requesting dental records of the presumed victim. The investigation suggested that the discovered body belonged to 27-year-old Jessica Bardwell. The examination revealed that her death was the result of a crime, but the exact cause could not be determined due to the body's advanced decomposition. Notably, an anonymous informant provided crucial information that led to the discovery of the body, but their identity was not disclosed. Jessica Bardwell, a beloved daughter and friend, had seemingly vanished from the home she shared with her boyfriend, Jason Lowe. Her father, Gary, sensed trouble and set out from Mississippi to Texas to search for her, following his instincts that she was in danger. Let's start from the beginning. Gary had an exceptionally strong bond with his daughter Jessica. He recalled being deeply moved when she was born on September 10, 1988, in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Gary and Carla Bardwell were wonderful parents to Jessica and her older brother Brandon. The siblings got along well, with Brandon always protecting his little sister from bullies. Their grandmother, Kitty, who adored her grandchildren, would often visit and engage in fun activities with them, such as reading books, sharing life stories, and playing games. In short, they were a quintessential American family. Jessica was a happy and kind girl with a unique style. She dreamed of working in the beauty industry and opening her own salon. When she was 14, her parents got divorced, and she chose to live with her father, Gary, with whom she had a warm and trusting relationship. Gary, a firefighter, remarried Gina, who was an excellent homemaker and took good care of Jessica. As Jessica grew up, she wanted to be independent and moved to Orange Beach, Alabama, where she worked as a waitress at Cobalt Restaurant. She kept in touch with her father, who would visit her and take her boating and fishing. Jessica's friend and restaurant manager, Kimberly, admired the strong bond between Jessica and her father. At Cobalt, Jessica met Terry, and they started dating. However, she soon fell for Jason, a friend of Terry's, and left him for Jason. This new relationship turned her life around, and Jason promised to help her achieve her dreams. He got a job in Dallas, Texas, and Jessica followed him, without telling her father, afraid of disappointing him. In Dallas, Jessica searched for a new job and looked for a location for her salon. She and Jason planned to get married and buy a house. However, her relationship with her father suffered, and she stopped answering his calls. Gary was worried and eventually found out about Jason and Jessica's move. He tried to re-establish contact, but discovered that Jason controlled all communications. Months later, Jessica contacted her father, and he met Jason when they visited Pascagoula. Gary disliked Jason and tried to convince Jessica not to return to Texas, but she insisted on following her dreams. Despite Gary's concerns, Jessica seemed happy and didn't show any signs of distress. Gary's fatherly instincts kicked in, after meeting his daughter's boyfriend, Jason, prompting him to write a song titled "Taken" for his daughter. Unfortunately, his concerns proved justified. 4 months after Jessica moved to Texas, she suddenly stopped responding to her family's calls. The final straw came on May 8th, when she failed to wish her mother and stepmother a happy Mother's Day, a gesture uncharacteristic of her. Gary sensed something was terribly wrong, especially since she missed a cherished family holiday. He immediately called Jason, who claimed he didn't know Jessica's whereabouts, citing their open relationship as the reason. However, Gary knew this was a lie, as Jason controlled every aspect of Jessica's life. The next morning, Gary drove to Texas, suspecting Jason's involvement in his daughter's disappearance. He messaged Jason, warning him that he would face consequences if Jessica wasn't home when he arrived. Upon reaching their apartment, Gary found no trace of Jessica or her belongings, but Jason continued to feign ignorance. Later, Kimberly shared disturbing details about Jessica's relationship with Jason. He had wasted money on drugs and entertainment, and his promises to help Jessica achieve her dreams had vanished. In private, Jason was rude and aggressive, leading to frequent conflicts with Jessica. With Jessica still missing, Gary filed a missing person report with the Richardson police. Detective Hiram Hall, a father of 3 daughters, led the investigation into her disappearance. The police spoke with Jason several times, inspecting the house, but found no trace of Jessica. Jason claimed he last saw Jessica on May 8th, leaving without explanation, possibly to visit her parents. However, investigators discovered that Jessica had actually sold her car 3 weeks earlier, a fact Jason knew about since he was present at the sale. This raised suspicions, prompting the police to interrogate him again on May 12th. During the investigation, police found cocaine in Jason's kitchen and a suspicious substance in his garage. The Audi car inside the garage had mud stains and a detached bumper. Although the car was empty, the police suspected Jessica might be inside. The smell of decomposition led them to examine the trunk, where they found blood stains. Jason claimed he got stuck in the mud while searching for Jessica, but he couldn't explain the blood in the car or the cocaine in his home. Given the circumstances, the case was reclassified as a homicide to prevent Jason from fleeing. Despite the lack of a body, the police charged Jason with homicide, and the search for Jessica continued. Eventually, her body was found, and the autopsy report revealed that she had been brutally discarded. A year later, Jason claimed the incident was an accident and hoped for the jury's understanding. However, the prosecution faced challenges in building their case, and the defense staged a mock trial that resulted in a not guilty verdict. After Jason revealed the location of Jessica's body, he received a shorter prison sentence, allowing her family to give her a dignified burial. Jessica's father, Gary, was consumed by grief and anger, seeking justice in a unique way. He took a photo of Jason, placed it on a stump, and hit it with a 12-pound sledgehammer, finding some small comfort in this form of emotional release. Gary struggled to cope with his loss, feeling guilty for not persuading Jessica to stay away from her controlling boyfriend, Jason. He had hoped she would break up with him, but she had chosen to give him another chance instead. During the trial, Gary replayed their last conversations in his mind, including a call from Jessica when she admitted he was right about Jason after an argument. Although she had briefly found shelter with a friend, she had returned to Jason the next day. Gary had reluctantly accepted her decision, a choice he would later regret deeply. When Mr. Bardwell arrived in Texas, he was determined to seek justice. During her opening statement, prosecutor Cynthia Walker described Jason as a complex person who few people wanted to associate with due to his history of substance abuse, which often triggered violent outbursts. It's possible that Jessica was a victim of one such episode. Prosecutor Wes Wynn called upon Jason's former girlfriends to testify. They corroborated the prosecution's claims, sharing their own fears of Jason's aggression, which was fueled by jealousy. Like Jessica, Jason had isolated them from their loved ones and exhibited manipulative and deceitful behavior. These traits ultimately led each of them to end their relationships with him, which required careful planning and caution. However, Jason was able to present himself as a superior individual to many people, deceiving them about his true nature. In response to the allegations, Jason revealed that he had started using drugs at the age of 13, influenced by his friends, which led to addiction. Despite his struggles, he managed to earn multiple degrees and secure a job with a well-known global company, demonstrating his determination to not let his addiction define him. Jason admitted to planning to fulfill Jessica's dream of building a family together, motivated by his love for her. However, the prosecution presented a different image of Jason, contradicting his claims. The investigation revealed that Jessica died between May 1st and May 3rd, likely on the day she argued with her neighbors, the Jordans, and was last seen alive. After the argument, Jason moved Jessica's body to the garage and placed it in the trunk of his car, where it stayed for several days. Forensic evidence confirmed that the blood found in the Audi belonged to Jessica. Jason then transported her body to a remote farm and hid it in the nearby woods. The sheet used to wrap the body was later found to be part of Jessica's bedding set, which Jason still had in his home, despite Jessica's death and her body decomposing in the car. After Jessica's death, the accused continued to see multiple women, and his phone contained evidence of this, including flirtatious messages and intimate photos that he had sent to them before meeting them at his apartment. Jason claimed that he was trying to distract himself from his emotional pain and guilty feelings by using substances, which he believed made dealing with reality easier. The investigation discovered Jason's presence at Jessica's time of death through a clever tactic. Because Jason had consistently denied any involvement, detectives asked Tommy Jordan, someone who knew Jason, to have a conversation with him while being monitored. During this conversation, Jason finally admitted to making a terrible mistake with Jessica, expressing guilt and remorse, although he only acknowledged culpability for criminal negligence. Jason's statement to the police was seen as a confession, and they realized they had caught him. Jason made a deal with the prosecution and revealed the location of Jessica's body. At the trial, he finally told his side of the story. According to Jason, he and Jessica had taken libido-enhancing pills that evening and got intimate in the shower. During the shower, Jason slipped and Jessica fell, hitting her head on the bathtub. She complained of feeling hot and dizzy and sat down. Jason claimed he offered to call an ambulance, but Jessica refused, saying she just needed to rest and sleep. However, the next morning, Jason found her lying on his chest, unconscious and not breathing. Despite his attempts to revive her, Jessica was dead. Scared of being accused of murder, Jason hesitated to call the police and decided to take matters into his own hands. He initially left the body in his car and later hid it on a remote farm, carelessly dumping her in a pile of trash without a proper burial. However, Jason's story was not believable due to his questionable character and the medical examination findings. The autopsy revealed that Jessica had suffered severe head injuries that couldn't have resulted from just falling in the shower, indicating that Jason had attempted to cover up evidence of physical abuse. As a result, his entire story was proven to be a fabrication. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found Jason guilty. Judge Scott Becker sentenced Jason Lowe to 50 years in prison, a reduced term due to a plea deal with the prosecution. Jason won't be eligible for parole until at least 2041. At the sentencing, Gary, Jessica's father, felt relieved that justice had been served, but was disturbed by Jason's lack of remorse. 2 of Jason's ex-girlfriends, including Chrissy Chambers, were present at the sentencing. Chambers expressed sympathy for Jessica, warning her to get out of the relationship if she could. Even now, Jason maintains his innocence, claiming the homicide was an accident. Unfortunately, Jessica didn't recognize Jason's true nature until it was too late. She had grown up with a positive male role model in her father Gary, and didn't realize that some men can be deceitful and violent. This tragic story serves as a warning to women to prioritize their own safety, freedom, and well-being, lest they suffer a devastating fate, not just for themselves, but for their loved ones. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michael Van Eck. Michael Van Eck was born on August 14, 1987, in a city that was once a hub for gold miners. He was the only brother to 4 sisters, Natasha, Michelle, Bianca, and Rihanna. Michael grew up in a close-knit family with caring and loving parents who worked hard to provide a decent life for their children. His father was an entrepreneur, and his mother created a nurturing atmosphere at home that encouraged the growth and development of their kids. Michael was a sociable and kind person who did well in school and sports. He even earned a black belt in karate, which gave him confidence and resilience. After completing his education, Michael trained as an electrician, a profession that offered good earnings and promising job prospects. He worked at mine number 4 of the Beatrix mine in the small town of Unison. In 2011, at the age of 23, Michael decided to register on a dating site to distract himself from a recent breakup and meet new people. That's when he came across the profile of a sweet and smiling girl who shared his interests. They both disliked loud parties and wanted to find true love and build a strong family. Michael was pleasantly surprised to have found a suitable match online. On April 2nd, he excitedly told his mother that he had a date and was busy preparing for it. He even withdrew 3,000 rand from his account to impress the girl. However, he was uneasy about the unusual meeting spot his friend had chosen, the city cemetery, and didn't mention it to his parents. At around 9 p.m. that evening, Michael said goodbye to his family and left the house, getting into his silver Peugeot 2007, a gift from his parents for his coming of age. When he arrived at the cemetery, the girl was running a bit late, but she looked stunning in a white dress and greeted him with a smile. They chatted comfortably, and she suggested they head to a more secluded area of the cemetery. There, they found a romantic setup, a blanket and a basket of fruit and wine. After having a glass of wine, the girl suddenly kissed Michael. But the pleasant feeling quickly turned to pain and horror as he realized he had fallen into a sinister trap. Chana Van Haren was born in 1991, a time of crisis for her parents. Her mother's pregnancy prompted the couple to put their divorce on hold and try to salvage their relationship. However, their efforts ultimately failed, and their home life continued to deteriorate. Chana's mother made no effort to hide her resentment towards her daughter, viewing her as an unwanted reminder of her husband. After the divorce, Chana's mother took the children and left their father behind. Chana suffered from a severe lack of love and attention from her mother, feeling lonely and misunderstood. Among her siblings, Chana struggled the most, growing increasingly withdrawn and sullen from a young age. She exhibited disturbing behaviors, such as talking about death and creating disturbing drawings. Her grandparents, alarmed by her behavior, suspected supernatural influence and took her to church, where she was subjected to an exorcism ritual. Chana's mental health declined as she got older. At 10, she had a disturbing incident where she threatened a house guest with a knife, prompting her family to seek professional psychiatric help. Fortunately, the medication improved her mood, and her father made an effort to spend quality time with her, even taking her on hunting trips. However, Chana later revealed that she found pleasure in harming animals, often bringing home dead creatures. When Chana turned 12, she formed a problematic friendship with an older man who introduced her to harmful substances and took advantage of her vulnerability. 2 years later, her mother moved to New Zealand, leaving Chana and her siblings in the care of their father and stepmother. At 15, Chana became involved with a 22-year-old man who had an unhealthy interest in Satanism, occultism, and voodoo cults. Fortunately, by her 17th birthday, Chana's life started to take a positive turn. She distanced herself from harmful relationships, successfully graduated from high school, and enrolled in college to study art and graphic design. After abandoning her interest in Satanism and ceasing to use harmful substances, Chana's emotional well-being significantly improved. She excelled in her studies and eventually secured a job in her chosen field. Chana's new job provided her with a supportive community, including her colleagues and management, where she discovered her talent for visual arts, earning her respect and recognition. She also started dating Warren, giving the impression to outsiders, including her family and close friends, that her life was back on track. However, beneath the surface, her inner struggles persisted. Her father was especially relieved, hoping she had finally grown up and would soon get married. But an unexpected obstacle emerged, threatening to disrupt her newfound stability. Warren's friend Roy, who claimed to be highly sensitive, sensed a dark and malevolent presence in Chana, despite her kind and friendly nature. His concerns were dismissed due to the contrast between his perceptions and her outward appearance. One day, Roy approached Chana, asking about Norman, a name that kept appearing in his mind, implying she might be unfaithful to Warren. Chana's response was shocking. She spat in his face and demanded he stop questioning her. Chana's friend, Norman, was later revealed to be the name of her imaginary childhood friend, Zazzle. This discovery changed the dynamics among their group of friends. At a party, Chana became interested in 24-year-old Martin. Martin came from a respected and wealthy family, unlike Chana. He had a good relationship with both his parents and was smart, well-mannered, and performed well in school. However, Martin had been struggling with a mental illness since he was 6 years old. He started having hallucinations, claiming that an entity appeared to him, making him believe he had incredible strength. As Martin grew older, his mental condition worsened, leading to problems at school and home. At 14, he was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility and diagnosed with schizophrenia. Although conventional treatment didn't work, his family and doctors eventually found the right medication to control his condition, except for occasional outbursts of aggression. Chana and Martin, two unstable young individuals, started a romantic relationship. Despite their outward appearance of happiness, their parents were oblivious to the issues the couple had faced in the past. As their relationship progressed, it ultimately led to devastating consequences. At first, the couple was social and outgoing, attending parties and interacting with others. Friends recalled noticing cuts on their hands, which they jokingly attributed to intimate experiments. However, as time passed, Chana and Martin began to withdraw from their social circle and developed an interest in dark practices, including Satanism, voodoo, and occult rituals. This fascination eventually extended to infamous serial killers. In 2011, Martins posted a photo with his girlfriend Chana on social media, captioned "Killers" with an ambiguous emoji. At the time, no one took the post seriously. However, unbeknownst to others, the couple had dark fantasies that eventually turned into a sinister plan. They wanted to torture and kill homeless people, and even practiced on animals. But their plan was put on hold, as they couldn't find a suitable victim. Chana created a profile on a dating site and caught the attention of Michael Van Eck. The couple targeted him for their twisted plan, and Chana suggested they meet in person. Michael agreed, despite the unusual meeting location. Chana and Martins carefully prepared for the date, planning every detail, including what to wear and how to end Michael's life. Chana approached the meeting fully prepared, and the trap was set. Michael fell for the bait, and Martins attacked him from behind with a knife. Despite being stabbed around 30 times, Michael resisted, which caught the attackers off guard. Chana intervened, and together, they overwhelmed Michael, who begged them to end his suffering. After the attack, Martins slit his own throat, and the couple began to dismember Michael's body. They severed his legs and decapitated him, placing the body parts in bags. They buried the body in a shallow grave, but couldn't make it deep enough due to lacking shovels. They then left the scene with the body parts using Michael's car, which they later abandoned in a troubled neighborhood. The next day, A cemetery worker discovered the grave and alerted the authorities. Meanwhile, Michael's parents were frantically searching for him, and his workplace reported him missing. The police found Michael's car, which led them to the cemetery, where they uncovered the gruesome crime scene. The local police were already investigating a mysterious body found on the cemetery grounds, with all signs pointing to foul play. They brought Michael Van Eck's family into the picture, as he had gone missing a day earlier. At the cemetery, Michael's mother identified her son's body by recognizing his personal belongings and distinctive childhood burn scars. The autopsy revealed that Michael had suffered multiple knife wounds and signs of struggle. The body had been dismembered after death, with a level of professional precision suggesting the perpetrators had experience with such acts. The evidence pointed to multiple attackers being involved, given the number and nature of the wounds, as well as the strength required to overpower the victim. DNA testing confirmed the body was 23-year-old Michael Van Eck's. During the investigation, police seized Michael's phone and computer, tracing his last communication to Chav Van Haan, who had invited him to the cemetery on the fateful night. When questioned, Chav and her boyfriend Martin confessed to their involvement in the murder. Chav's father was shocked by her calm and defiant confession, in which she claimed to have dreamed of committing such a crime since she started hunting with him. The lack of remorse from the couple shocked everyone, and they seemed to relish the public attention. They had planned to take their own lives if caught, but later changed their minds, wanting to live the life of monsters. The police search of the couple's apartment revealed a disturbing environment. The walls were covered in distorted portraits of Chav, depicting her without eyes, mouth, or ears in various guises. The police found disturbing evidence in the rooms, including ritual items, animal scalps, knives, and unknown objects. They also discovered the belongings of the murdered him, including his glasses and wallet. Martins later admitted that they took the victim's money to fund their next crime. The most shocking discovery, however, was made in the refrigerator. The police found the victim's head with his mouth sewn shut, which suggested that the couple planned to use it as a ritual bowl. Additionally, the victim's eyes and ears were found in separate containers. The police also found the victim's hand and leg buried near the murderer's home, along with the bodies of several animals. The girl's diary revealed her dark thoughts and plans. The evidence suggested that the couple derived pleasure from taking lives and mutilating bodies. Both Martins and Chana underwent mental evaluations, and the commission confirmed that they were aware of their actions and desired the consequences. In November 2011, Chana stood trial as a serial offender, despite it being a single incident. She openly admitted that she did not feel remorse and desired to repeat her actions. Psychiatrists diagnosed Chana with psychopathic and antisocial disorders, making her a more dangerous individual. Throughout the trial, she remained emotionless. Chana was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison without parole, with 20 years for murder and an additional 15 years for robbery and dismemberment. Martins defended himself in court, claiming that he did not remember the events until he was in jail. He admitted to studying Satanism and occultism, which he believed pushed him and Chana to commit the crime. During the trial, he apologized to the victim's parents, although his apology sounded insincere. He implied that the victim was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, when in reality, the couple had lured him into a premeditated trap. Michael's mother was overcome with grief and struck Martins during one of the sessions. In the end, Martins was also found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving half of his sentence. After 2014, Chana and her lover Martins maintained a relationship through letters while he was in prison. In these letters, Martins referred to Chana as a dark goddess and wrote poetic phrases such as, "When you part your lips, words of a dead butterfly spill out, and they fall upon my mystical heart and paint it with sweet poison." However, over time, Chana ended the relationship, feeling that they had become emotionally disconnected from each other. While in prison, Chana exhibited exemplary behavior, teaching her fellow inmates art and theology. Some collectors, fascinated by notorious criminals, paid large sums for a photograph of Chana with her autograph, as well as a print of her hand. Martins also attracted a following, with a fan club that was monitored by the police for a long time to prevent his followers from emulating his violent actions. Despite his circumstances, Martins continued to receive therapy and completed his education through correspondence courses. Ultimately, the case highlights how two unstable individuals, driven by their desires and lacking boundaries, can destroy an innocent life. Furthermore, it reveals how some people, often hiding behind a seemingly normal facade, can harbor dark and sinister intentions. Unfortunately, new acquaintances can sometimes have a profoundly negative impact on our lives, marking a point of no return. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Adrienne Jones. Adrienne Jessica Jones was a bright light in Mansfield in 1995. As a 16-year-old junior at Mansfield High School, she captivated everyone with her beauty, exceptional qualities, and impressive achievements. Adrienne was an outstanding student, consistently excelling in advanced honors courses and demonstrating a strong work ethic. She spent at least 2 hours each night studying to ensure her success, which earned her high grades. Her kindness, intelligence, and infectious spirit made her a role model and a beloved figure among her classmates and teachers. In addition to her academic prowess, Adrienne was a talented athlete. She was a dedicated member of the girls' soccer team, showcasing remarkable skill and dedication on the field. After graduating from Mansfield High School, Adrienne's dream was to become a veterinarian and help animals. After a game injury forced her to temporarily leave her team, Adrienne didn't give up on sports. Instead, she joined the girls' cross-country team, which allowed her to stay active and improve her fitness. She threw herself into the new challenge, working hard to get in shape. Her dedication paid off, and she soon became a key member of the cross-country team. In addition to her academic and athletic pursuits, Adrienne also held down a part-time job, working 20 hours a week at a local fast food restaurant, Golden Fried Chicken. Despite her busy schedule, Adrienne enjoyed being the center of attention, particularly from teenage boys in Mansfield. Her friends would even describe her as a bit of a flirt. She took great care in her appearance, spending at least 2 hours each day on her makeup to ensure she looked perfect. Adrienne, like many teenagers, often tested the limits set by her parents. Despite her good nature, her parents were particularly protective of her due to the changing environment in Mansfield, where crime was on the rise. They implemented a strict 9 p.m. curfew on weekends to ensure her safety, requiring her to provide proof of her activities, such as ticket stubs, if she wanted to stay out later. To prevent her from sneaking out, her father also nailed her bedroom window shut. Although Adrienne occasionally disobeyed her parents and left the house at night to meet her friends, on Sunday, December 3, 1995, she was given special permission to stay up late to talk to her boyfriend, Tracy Smith, who was out of town with his parents. During their phone conversation, Adrienne's mother overheard her mention that another call was coming in. When asked about the caller's identity, Adrienne said it was David from her cross-country team, who seemed upset about something. Adrienne's family started their day as usual the next morning, but her mother's concern grew when she heard Adrienne's alarm still going off in her bedroom. When she went to check on her, she discovered that Adrienne was missing, and her bed had not been slept in. Despite trying to stay calm, Adrienne's mother quickly became worried. She initially thought Adrienne might have gone for an early morning run, but this idea was quickly dismissed when she saw Adrienne's running shoes still on the floor. In the past, Adrienne had occasionally sneaked out at night to meet friends, but she had always returned home by morning, making her mother even more worried about her disappearance. Worried about Adrienne, her parents contacted the police. Unbeknownst to them, a shocking discovery was made on a farm several miles away. At around 7 a.m., on Seaton Road in Grand Prairie, Texas, a man was on his way to check his mailbox when he noticed that the gate to his property had been knocked down. Curious, he entered his farm and was met with an unsettling scene. Initially, the man thought he was looking at roadkill, but as he got closer, he realized it was a lifeless teenage girl lying on the ground. The man immediately called the police, who arrived to find a disturbing sight. The teenager had been shot execution style, with 2 bullet wounds on her left cheek and forehead. In addition to these gunshot wounds, her head had suffered severe injuries. Moreover, her arms and legs were covered in scrapes and bruises, indicating that she had run through the farm's barbed wire gate. A teenager's violent murder sparked a desperate investigation. The fact that she was found in her nightclothes suggested she had been preparing for bed when her life was brutally cut short. The execution-style killing led police to consider possible links to gang violence or drugs. After discovering the body on the farm, the Grand Prairie Police immediately alerted all nearby agencies, sending out a detailed description of the victim, including her age, height, weight, and other physical characteristics. They hoped that another agency might recognize the description and make a connection to a missing person. It wasn't long before the Mansfield police got in touch with Grand Prairie officers, having made a match. The Mansfield police identified the murdered teenager as Adrienne Jones. With the victim identified, the police had the heartbreaking task of informing Adrienne's parents about her tragic death. When they broke the news to her mother, she was overcome with grief. In the small town of Mansfield, news of Adrienne's murder spread quickly through her high school, leaving her classmates and friends devastated. Classes were interrupted as the news traveled through the halls, and students tearfully consoled one another. The town was on high alert following the discovery of Adrienne's body in a field, with rumors and theories circulating about her death. One theory was that Adrienne was involved in drugs, while others suspected a serial killer might be living among them. Adrienne's parents cooperated with the police, providing information about the last time they saw their daughter. Her mother specifically mentioned a phone call Adrienne had with her boyfriend, Tracy, and another teenager, David, who joined the call while Adrienne was on the phone. After midnight on the night of Adrienne's murder, one of her younger brothers heard a car engine outside their house. When he looked out the window, he saw a pickup truck driving away. The police were interested in identifying a person named David, who had called Adrienne that night. To learn more, they spoke with Adrienne's cross-country coach, who mentioned a team member named David Graham. However, the coach was surprised to hear that David had called Adrienne, as there was no indication that they had ever interacted before. David Graham was a 17-year-old high school student with big dreams. After watching his first air show, he decided he wanted to become an Air Force pilot. From then on, he dedicated himself to achieving his goal. David was well liked by his peers at Mansfield High School, where he was popular and charming. Many girls were attracted to him, but he was in a relationship with Diane Zamora, a high school senior who shared his desire to enter the military. Diane stood out from the crowd, actively pursuing her aspirations. After Adrienne's murder, the police interviewed David Graham, who acknowledged knowing her from their cross-country team, but claimed their relationship never went beyond friendship. When asked if he had contacted Adrienne on the night of her death, David denied it, saying he was home studying with his girlfriend, Diane Zamora. The police investigated David as a possible suspect, seeking information from Adrienne's friends to see if she had ever mentioned him. However, one of her closest friends, who was privy to Adrienne's secrets, said Adrienne had never discussed David with her. The police also checked Adrienne's phone book and found David's number was not listed, which further led them to believe he was not involved in her murder. As a result, they never administered a polygraph test to David and eventually cleared him as a suspect. The police investigated Adrienne's boyfriend, Tracy Smith, as a suspect in her murder. However, they cleared him after verifying his alibi, which placed him out of town with his family on the night of the murder. Tracy also passed a polygraph test, further supporting his innocence. During his police interview, Tracy suggested they investigate someone named Brian, whom Adrienne had mentioned was calling her on the night of her murder, while they were on the phone. The police identified the Brian in question as Brian McMillian, a local teenager. Their investigation into Brian McMillian revealed that he used to work at a pharmacy near the restaurant where Adrienne used to work. Brian had developed an obsession with Adrienne and would often visit the restaurant to catch a glimpse of her. Eventually, Adrienne grew tired of his constant presence and began hiding in the back whenever she saw him coming. The police questioned Brian McMillian about the murder of Adrienne Jones. At first, he claimed to have no knowledge of her, but later admitted to knowing her. When asked if he had talked to her on the night of her murder, Brian said he didn't remember. He explained that he had been drinking that night due to feelings of depression and loneliness. The officers also asked Brian if he had visited Adrienne's house on the night of her murder, and he acknowledged that he might have done so. The police asked Brian's father if his son could take a lie detector test, but his father refused. 1 week later, the police raided Brian's house with guns, a decision made due to concerns that he might be armed. The police took this precaution to ensure everyone's safety, including their own. After Brian was arrested for Adrienne's murder, many people came forward to show their support for him. Brian's friends said he was a gentle and non-violent person. His father also confirmed that Brian was at home all night when Adrienne was killed and didn't leave. Despite this, Brian was held in jail for 3 weeks, missing Christmas and New Year's, while the investigation and legal proceedings continued. During this time, the district attorney's office asked Brian to take a polygraph test, which he passed successfully. After this, the district attorney's office had little evidence to link Brian to Adrienne's murder, so they released him from custody. 9 months into the investigation, the police in Mansfield, Texas, finally got a breakthrough, and it came from Annapolis, Maryland, where Diane Zamora was attending the Naval Academy. Diane Zamora, a cadet at the Naval Academy, allegedly confessed to her fellow students that she and her boyfriend, David Graham, had murdered a girl named Adrienne Jones in Mansfield, Texas. The Mansfield police traveled to Annapolis, Maryland, to interview Diane, but she denied making any such admission. The Naval Academy suspended Diane and sent her home pending an investigation. Since Diane was uncooperative, the police went to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado, to question David. Initially, David claimed he didn't know why Diane would fabricate a story about killing Adrienne Jones. However, during the interview, David began to crack and asked to write a statement. In a 4.5-page confession letter, David detailed how he and Diane planned and carried out the murder of Adrienne Jones, including a cross-country event in November 1995, where he offered to drive Adrienne home. During the ride, David and Adrienne parked in an elementary school parking lot and had sex. Afterwards, David felt overwhelmed with guilt because he loved his girlfriend Diane deeply and knew that his infidelity would cause her immense pain. One evening, while David was helping Diane study for her SATs, they got into an argument. Unable to keep his secret any longer, David broke down in tears and confessed his infidelity to Diane. He told her that he had hooked up with Adrienne, which shattered Diane's heart and left her feeling deeply hurt and angry. Diane was inconsolable and lashed out at David, screaming and arguing with him. She was so angry that she wished he were dead, and she felt intense hatred towards Adrienne. Diane's emotions were too much to handle, and she struggled to come to terms with what had happened. David pleaded with Diane, promising to do whatever it took to save their relationship. David and Diane decided that the only way to repair their relationship was to kill Adrienne. In his confession letter, David admitted that on December 3rd, he called Adrienne Jones and asked her to secretly leave her house late at night to meet with him. He specifically asked Adrienne to keep their meeting private and not tell anyone else about it. David originally planned to lure Adrienne into a trap, kill her by breaking her neck, and then dispose of her body in a lake. On the agreed night at 2:30 a.m., David picked up Adrienne in his car while Diane hid in the hatchback. They drove to a secluded spot 10 miles out of town, turning off the highway onto Satan Road. David stopped the car, and Adrienne subtly adjusted her seat, creating the impression they were about to be intimate. Unbeknownst to Adrienne, David had secretly signaled for Diane to emerge from the trunk. Diane came out of the rear of the vehicle and approached the front. Diane confronted Adrienne, who was seated in the passenger seat. Diane then hit Adrienne on the head with a weight from David's gym set. Despite being severely injured, Adrienne managed to escape by crawling out of the car window. David and Diane panicked, and David grabbed his 9mm Makarov weapon to chase after Adrienne. Adrienne was severely injured and collapsed in a nearby field due to her head wound. When David caught up to her, he shot her twice and then returned to his car. After Adrienne died, David and his accomplice Diane exchanged "I love you" as their first words to each other. The police later questioned Diane, who had a statement prepared to confess her involvement. David and Diane were arrested and charged with capital murder. Although they initially confessed, they later retracted their statements, with David claiming Diane acted alone and Diane alleging David committed the crime by himself. In 1998, Adrienne's mother requested that the death penalty be removed as a possible sentence for David and Diane. Diane's trial began in February 1998. Multiple witnesses testified that Diane showed no remorse for killing Adrienne. The jury found Diane guilty of capital murder, resulting in an automatic life imprisonment sentence, with the possibility of parole in 40 years. David Graham was convicted of murdering Adrienne Jones and received a life sentence, with the possibility of parole in 40 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Greg Mulvihill. Diana Lovejoy and Greg Mulvihill, both living far from their families, met through an online dating site in 2005. They quickly formed a strong bond, and their relationship soon turned serious. The couple then decided to move in together in San Diego. Diana had always been passionate about athletics and fitness, starting with playing sports in high school and eventually becoming a competitive triathlete. The couple shared a love for the outdoors, which played a significant role in their relationship. During the 2000s, San Diego was emerging as a major tech hub, and Diana and Greg took advantage of the abundant job opportunities. Both Diana and Greg excelled in their careers, with Diana being known for her dependability by her coworkers. After 2 years of dating, they got married in 2007, marking the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. For their honeymoon, they chose Costa Rica, where they attended surf school. Diana and Greg were deeply in love during the early years of their marriage. They shared a passion for life and made the most of every opportunity that came their way, enjoying countless adventures together. After their wedding, they moved to Carlsbad, a picturesque suburb north of San Diego, which offered a perfect blend of natural beauty, outdoor activities, and seclusion. Diana was immediately smitten with the area and felt like she was living her dream when she settled into her ideal home. However, 3 years into their marriage, their relationship started to take a turn. Diana began to experience symptoms that led her to believe she had fibromyalgia, a chronic condition characterized by widespread pain and tenderness in specific areas of the body. Although the exact cause of fibromyalgia remains unknown, several factors are thought to contribute to its development. Diana's fibromyalgia diagnosis significantly impacted her marriage to Greg. Previously an energetic and adventurous person, she struggled to adapt to her new limitations, including reduced stress and rest. This sudden change in lifestyle created challenges for their relationship as a couple. In 2011, Greg took Diana on a relaxing vacation to Santa Cruz, California, to help her cope with her condition. As a caring husband, Greg recognized the toll fibromyalgia was taking on Diana's well-being, including constant muscle pain, fatigue, and limited energy. The illness made it difficult for her to maintain her job, and eventually Diana had to step away from her career to focus on managing her symptoms. She began spending more time at home in Carlsbad. Above all, Diana's greatest desire was to be a mother, to love and raise a child, to be confident and happy. Diana and Greg had been trying to have a child for years, but unfortunately, Diana suffered multiple miscarriages. These losses took a toll on Diana, affecting her both physically and emotionally. Although she didn't have children, she poured her love into her two beloved cats, Lanny and Turtle. However, her world was turned upside down when Turtle fell ill and eventually passed away. To comfort Diana during this difficult time, Greg surprised her with a new kitten, which she named Taffy. This thoughtful gesture brought Diana immense comfort. In a surprising turn of events, Diana discovered she was pregnant after years of unsuccessful attempts to conceive. Overjoyed, Greg looked forward to becoming a father, while Diana felt her dream of motherhood finally within reach. In September 2012, Diana gave birth to a baby boy, and Greg took time off work to bond with their newborn son. Greg loved being a father and cherished every moment with his son. Diana, on the other hand, was always worried about her son's health and happiness. As time passed, she started to suspect that her son might have a similar condition to her fibromyalgia. However, Greg was convinced that their son was healthy and didn't see any reason to worry. Despite their differing opinions on their son's health, Diana remained convinced that her son was ill. She began researching extensively and discovered a medication called guaifenesin, which was similar to Mucinex and often used to treat chest infections. Some people believed it could also alleviate fibromyalgia symptoms. Diana was determined to give her son high doses of guaifenesin, but Greg strongly opposed the idea, fearing it was unnecessary and could harm their son. This disagreement over their son's health care created growing tension in their marriage. Diana and Greg's marriage became increasingly strained after Greg suffered a shoulder injury that forced him to quit his job. As a result, the household income decreased, and Diana took a sales job to compensate. She also tried to earn extra money by creating online cooking videos, with Greg handling the camera work. However, this venture didn't yield the desired results. Diana also appeared in promotional videos for kitty litter, but this effort also failed to bring in significant revenue. As their financial struggles continued, Diana and Greg's disagreements escalated, particularly regarding their 2-year-old son's health. By this point, they were constantly fighting, and their relationship was in jeopardy. Diana confided in her co-workers that she felt Greg was unhelpful and unsupportive. In July 2014, Greg had a disturbing encounter with a police officer who questioned him about allegations of abuse made by Diana. According to the officer, Diana had filed multiple police reports against Greg, leading to his removal from the family home. Diana and their son were allowed to stay, leaving Greg to face the consequences of the allegations. Diana told a trusted friend that she had been assaulted by Greg while she was sleeping. She took medication that made her drowsy, and when she started to wake up, she realized Greg was touching her inappropriately without her permission. Diana also accused Greg of sexually abusing their son. The authorities, including Child Protective Services, got involved after Diana made these allegations. Greg denied the accusations and claimed that Diana was only making these charges because he disagreed with her about their son's health issues. In response, Greg filed for divorce from Diana and requested custody of their son. Detectives investigated claims that Greg abused Diana and their son, but found no evidence to support these allegations. In fact, psychiatric evaluations of Greg and the boy revealed no signs of abuse. A judge ultimately dropped the case and granted Greg 50-50 custody of their son, much to Diana's dismay. Despite this, Diana remained committed to being a good mother and distancing herself from Greg and the associated drama. As part of their divorce agreement, Diana stayed in the house and agreed to compensate Greg for his share of the property. By 2016, the former couple had managed to establish a relatively peaceful co-parenting arrangement, with each having equal access to their son. However, this fragile peace was shattered on September 1, 2016, when the Carlsbad Police Department received a call from Jason Kovac, a friend of Greg's. Jason called 911 to report that his friend Greg had been shot multiple times and was bleeding severely. A patrol officer from the Carlsbad Police Department responded immediately and found Jason and Greg on the side of the road. Jason told the officer that the shooting had occurred about half a mile away. The officer quickly realized that waiting for an ambulance would put Greg's life at risk, so he decided to drive Greg to the hospital himself. Meanwhile, the SWAT team arrived and began searching the area for the shooter, but they couldn't find anyone. At the hospital, doctors rushed Greg into emergency surgery, where they discovered he had a gunshot wound to his chest. Greg survived the surgery, but he was placed on life support afterwards. While Greg recovered in the hospital, detectives interviewed Jason, who was still shaken by the event. Jason explained that Greg had received a call from a private investigator claiming to have important documents related to his custody and divorce proceedings with Diana. The investigator didn't leave his name, but he gave Greg a specific meeting time and location. Greg was initially hesitant, but his curiosity got the better of him, and he asked Jason to come along for backup. Jason agreed, and they armed themselves with a flashlight and a child's baseball bat. They arrived at the remote location, which was extremely dark due to the new moon. The only light came from a small sliver of the moon. According to Jason, the caller instructed Greg to find a package attached to an electricity pole. When Greg saw the package, he walked towards it with his flashlight, scanning the area. Suddenly, he shouted, "Gun!" and a gunshot rang out. Greg and Jason started running for their lives, with bullets whizzing past their heads. They eventually reached their car, where Jason realized Greg had been shot and called 911. Jason couldn't provide a detailed description of the shooter, but he led the detectives to the exact location of the shooting. During their investigation, they found an intriguing clue near the electricity pole, a neatly folded Angry Birds towel that seemed to be intentionally left there to deceive Greg. Jason reported hearing 6 gunshots, but the investigators found no evidence of shell casings or a weapon. This lack of forensic evidence suggested that the shooter was experienced and knowledgeable about covering their tracks. During their search, the detectives noticed a strong smell of feces in the air, which led them to a pile of feces accompanied by a towel that seemed to have been used for cleanup. The investigators preserved the feces sample and towel as potential evidence, carefully packaging and transporting them to the crime lab for analysis. However, obtaining DNA evidence from the feces sample could take up to a month. In the meantime, the detectives continued their search for a suspect, investigating all available evidence and following up on leads. They focused on Greg's estranged wife, Diana Lovejoy, and questioned her about her possible involvement in the shooting. Diana denied any knowledge and provided an alibi, stating she was at home with her son at the time of the shooting. Greg unexpectedly woke up from life support and began to recover. When he was well enough, he was interviewed by detectives, who asked about his estranged wife's potential involvement. Greg expressed doubt that Diana was capable of such violence, but acknowledged their past conflicts and ongoing divorce and custody battle over their son. The detectives acquired the phone number used to lure Greg to the remote area, which led them to a pay-as-you-go plan and a purchase at Best Buy near Carlsbad. They obtained video footage of the purchase, which showed Diana Lovejoy buying the phone. This solidified her as the prime suspect, and she was arrested during a traffic stop. Diana claimed innocence during her arrest, but when confronted with the evidence, she admitted to buying the phone. She then revealed that she was afraid of Greg, had purchased a gun, and took shooting classes at Iron Sights, where she met instructor Weldon McDavid, an ex-Marine weapons expert. Diana's friendship with Weldon turned romantic and intimate. She told the detective that they planned to scare her estranged husband Greg to stop his harassment. Weldon told Diana to buy a specific phone, which they used to lure Greg to a remote location. Diana claimed Weldon's role was only to threaten Greg, not to use violence. She drove Weldon to the site and picked him up afterwards. When she heard police sirens, Weldon told her he had to shoot Greg in self-defense because Greg allegedly made aggressive moves towards him. Diana denied involvement in the shooting and said she never asked Greg to take violent action against her. She was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Greg recovered from his gunshot wound and was released from the hospital. However, news of Diana's involvement horrified people. Weldon was tracked down and brought in for questioning. Weldon told the detectives he was at home, 30 minutes away, on the night of the shooting. When asked for a DNA sample, Weldon became nervous. The detectives asked if his DNA would be at the crime scene, and Weldon claimed to remember stopping to use the bathroom on a dirt road the night before. The detectives obtained a search warrant and found a rifle with a live round and 6 spent shell casings in Weldon's garage. The shell casings matched a witness's account of hearing 6 gunshots. Weldon was arrested for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Searching Diana's house, the detectives found a suspicious search history on her computer. She had searched for "new moon," which coincided with the night of the shooting. This was significant because there was minimal ambient light during new moons, making it a suitable time for the murder. The detectives concluded that Diana had premeditated knowledge of the shooting and a motive to kill Greg. She would have had to pay him $120,000 in their divorce settlement, and eliminating him would be easier than paying the debt. Diana Lovejoy and Weldon McDavid's trial began in October 2017. Weldon claimed he never intended to shoot Greg. Weldon claimed his goal was only to scare Greg, but the situation escalated when either Greg or Jason yelled, "I got a gun." Weldon stated that, as a skilled marksman, if he had wanted to kill Greg, he would have been able to do so. However, the prosecution presented a different theory. They argued that Weldon did not shoot and kill Greg because Greg shone a flashlight in Weldon's eyes, disorienting him due to the darkness. Having sat in the dark for an extended period, Weldon's sense of direction was impaired. This ultimately saved Greg's life. The jury found Diana Lovejoy and Weldon McDavid guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Upon hearing the verdict, Diana collapsed, although the state believes she was faking it. Weldon was sentenced to 50 years to life, while Diana was sentenced to 26 years to life. Both maintain their innocence.